welcome to the Easthampton City Council meeting for Wednesday, March 4th. Could I have the roll call, please?
Peg Kana.
Here.
Salem Derby.
Present.
Omar Gomez.
Here.
JP Kuczynski.
Here.
Bill Lynch.
Here.
Tom Peak.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Lindsay Rothschild. Here. Owen Zaret.
Present.
Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no minutes to approve because we are in election season. And right now we will move on to public speak. If there's anyone in attendance who would like to speak on anything that is not on an agenda for today. Yes, sir. Come right up here. State your name and your address or street, whichever you prefer.
Donald Torrey, 17 School Street, Easthampton. At the meeting last on the 26th about the Board of Public Works, Mr. Kuczynski had mentioned that it's possible to stop the CPA tax on seniors. I was wondering if that's anything that's going to be discussed in the future, or if it's possible.
It will be discussed this evening.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. It's not quite yet time to start the public hearings. We're going to hold off on listening to the update from from Jeff Bagg, because I think you're going to be longer than 10 minutes, right? But if there are any other elected officials who would like to have any comments right now? Councilor Zaret?
Look so surprised.
Because you do not disappoint.
I'm not sure where to start. So I got some pictures from a constituent. I guess I'll preface this by saying that I am 100% in support of the city utilizing renewable and green energies. I think it's great. I think either via energy credits or directly feeding our grid or pilot payments, etc. I got a photo from the Park Street project that's going on, and it made me sad, and it made me pause a little bit when I saw the amount of deforestation that's going on with that project, elimination of wildlife, habitats, and ecosystems, etc. So I guess all I want to say is I think that while we proceed forward with a sustainable energy policy and continue to embrace green energies, we need to think about our canopy. And I know there's nothing that the city could have done about that, but I think we just have to be thoughtful about the rest of the environment around us when we're looking at these projects, especially on municipal parcels. That's all.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Any correspondence announcements? No?
I don't have any.
I don't have any either. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
Just one item to share with the council. At the Board of Public Works tonight, Director Pipchinsky submitted his letter that he was going to retire effective April 6th. So I just wanted to make sure that, and yes, and so he's beginning transition stuff, working with the board chair, and we'll go forward from there. But I wanted to get that, just share from the board meeting we just attended.
Mayor, is the replacement requisition coming from you, or would that come from the board?
It would come from the board, and then personnel would assist, like they would, like in the hiring of our.
Hey, Keith.
Oh, it's my nephew. Okay. Nikki's on record. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. It's like Monday. Okay. So, anyways, yeah, they would put the personal action form forward, and then personnel would help put the process, the posting, through working with the board.
Okay, and are you involved in the interview process, or again, is that the board?
Well, the board will define the process.
Okay.
You
Oh,
know,
all right.
so what they'd like to do,
We haven't
review.
done this in a while for the DPW.
I know, and so I did ask the director to review the job description and freshen up and what he thought could or maybe not be changed, and then, but he'll work through that with the Board of Public Works.
Okay. Any questions? Councilor Zaret?
Is it known who might be the interim director?
The board's assessing that,
Okay.
and, you know, I will say, and I certainly agree with the director, that the team, the DPW team, the management team, and also everybody under, extremely competent, really know their departments. The challenge will be, as we go into budget season, how we manage and get you know, the budget numbers down. We've already met, the director and I, once with the treasurer and the auditor, so we know where we're going. As far as costs, we just got our Chapter 90 money, about $529,000. There was a road list shared, so I mean, we're, you know, a lot of things are already in process. The supervisors know. Michelle in the office has been fully briefed in, goes to the board meeting, so she has a sense. But it's pretty typical that DPW as a whole works with the Treasurer's Department to make sure the money, you know, between enterprise and whatnot and rates.
Councilor Rist?
Do you have in your head how long Joe's been here? I know he's been here
35.
35 years.
35 years.
It's crazy. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We can do some reports from standing committees. Councilor Rist, if you'd like to start with finance?
Yes, I would.
Or should we hold off until after the public hearings?
Not necessary.
Okay.
I don't have much. I will, we are going to meet next Wednesday at 5:30, and we will be dealing with new items, which I'm about to place in motion to Finance Committee. First, the request to accept MGL Chapter 40, subsection 5B, cannabis stimulus funding. I move that be sent to the Finance Committee for review.
Motion is second to send the request to accept MDL Chapter 40, subsection 5B to finance. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
I have a supplemental appropriation. This will be a first reading. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $25,000 to be appropriated from CPA reserved for historic preservation, $25,000 to be appropriated to historic structure inventory Main Street extension, $25,000. The amount requested for the following purpose: to update and expand the inventory of historic structure in the Main Street extension and downtown area. I move that this be sent to the Finance Committee for review.
Second?
Motion is second for a supplemental appropriation of $25,000 from CPA to expand Main Street historic structure inventory. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
I have a question for the clerk. Does the cannabis stabilization funding acceptance require a public hearing?
No.
Okay. But I would like to move to set a public hearing for the $25,000 from the CPA for the historic structure inventory at our next meeting in the chambers.
So
That's a motion.
318.
Yes, that's a motion.
Motion to set a public hearing for the supplemental appropriation for March 18th, 2020. All those in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes.
We will begin to review the salaries and stipends as soon as the city clerk is out from under it, and I think she still has another election, so we're going to let her go for a while.
What do I have to do with it?
I'm going to ask you to do some research, like you always do for us, Barbara. All right, thank you. That's my.
Can you mention the CPA item that we talked about? That's the CPA thing.
Oh, we did begin our discussions on the exemption for seniors for the CPA. It is important to note, as we did at our meeting, I apologize, that that particular exemption includes low-income families, not just seniors. And we would hope that we could move forward with that, with some more research being done, and we invite Councilor Kwasinski to our next meeting to please help us with that research. Just to remind the council, once we approve it, it has to go on the ballot. And Barb, I have a question. There's no reason why it can't be on the ballot this year, could it?
I
In
don't,
November? Do you know if that's a
there,
law or?
well, some CPA can go on, but I'm not sure if this type of
This is an
CPA.
exemption thing.
I would have to check on that.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot that can go on a state election
If you
ballot.
could have that information for our next finance meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
And when is our next one?
Our next meeting is next Wednesday at 5:30 at these chambers. I think the mayor has something to
That's
say.
the 11th. Okay. At 5:30? Okay.
The mayor.
I would request on this issue that the treasurer and the auditor be included to cost out said proposal. And
One of the research items we did ask be done, and before we even bring it to the council, all that's going to be done. We wanted to go through what we needed to research with Councilor Kwasinski and send somebody out to get all that information. So,
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Peak.
Just wanted to say, since when we did the 41C and a half thing, I did a little bit of my own research on like just the size of those communities in Easthampton. If you need any help with just sort of, or if whoever ends up doing that needs any help sort of pulling census data or whatever, I would volunteer my help. That is what I do for a day job.
Hired.
Thank you. Thank you.
We don't fire people, we hire them here.
Okay. Public safety. Counselor, well, actually, is it quick? Okay, public safety, go ahead.
Mr. Connors. I want to start first. Our next meeting is going to be April 7th at 6 p.m. Then I received an email from Councilor Rothschild. Probably we have to move the time, but for now we want to set it at 6 p.m. We met last night. I want to start saying that about the speeding concern about the resident. We received a letter and recommendation from the BPW, and before the committee sent the recommendation to the full city council, I will schedule a meeting with the mayor and the president of the council to talk about a possible to make a committee, a new committee, and after we have the meeting, so probably we're going to propose to the full city council. Besides that, we have a letter about the concerns in South and Main Street about the lights. Thank you to Vice President Rest for his work with the letter, and to the Councilor Rothschild. We last night review it and change a little bit the language the Councilor Rest sent us. I apologize. I print the letter like 5 minutes before coming to the meeting, and that's why they don't have the letterhead. But I presented to you. We vote 3-0 last night in favor of the letter. I will bring again the letter for the next meeting with the letterhead, so that way we can sign it to the full city council. The full city council can sign it and send it to the DOT. Everybody have a copy, so you can review it if for the next meeting you're gonna make any amendment or anything. That's the time to do it. And beside that, I don't have anything else. That's conclude.
Okay, thank you.
An error has occurred. I'm unable to answer your question. Try again.
Well,
I didn't ask anything. What happened today?
I don't know. Mercury's in retrograde. On just public safety, I just quickly want to give an update that we have been talking among appropriate departments in City Hall about the coronavirus and being prepared. As well as there was a meeting today that the police chief and health agent attended to talk about, and specifically with Williston, but just overall preparation. And I would ask the police chief to report out whenever council found appropriate. I don't know if, the finance, but I did want to get that. And the school department has also been keeping an eye. We have the links from CDC from that, and are awaiting a larger plan from MEMA and the governor's office.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move the public hearings be open.
Second.
Motion to open the public hearings. All in favor?
Aye.
Council Riss, there are some appropriations.
Yes, the first one, I'm happy to announce, and I drove it today,
Yeah.
that the police department is asking for 2 hybrid cruisers. And finally, Ford has come up with Interceptor cruisers that meet the high performance standards that we need for our police department. One of the things that kept us from doing this over the years, even though years ago we have an ordinance about hybrid vehicles, is that we do not want to hamstring the police department with vehicles that underperform and will not work for them. They are very happy with this. I drove it. It is incredibly powerful and will save approximately $5,000 in gas. And what's even more appealing is that the Interceptor, which is the $63,000 vehicle, that's the one we drove today, right, Bob?
That's correct, yes, sir.
That actually only costs $3,500 more, so it pays for itself in less than a year in gas savings. These vehicles that he's asking for replace a 2014 gas Interceptor that has 125,000 and a 2006 Ford 500 that has 90,000. Both of them will be handed down to various departments, and I will turn it over to the chief. I just want to thank you for this, Chief. These are fantastic news for the community, for sustainability.
Council, you stole my thunder. I've got nothing left for you.
Well, you're better at it anyway. You can
I'll add a couple of things. I checked the mileage on the 2 vehicles today that we are repurposing. One, the Ford 500, we're going to repurpose to the school department, and the other Interceptor we're going to repurpose to Park and Rec. The Interceptor that we're repurposing to Park and Rec has 130,000 miles on it, and the Ford 500 has 86,000. One point I'd like to make is the very next cruiser that we'll replace, hopefully next year, with another hybrid, already has 125,000 miles on it as I stand here before you today. So the average of my fleet currently, the average miles on the entire fleet is over 80,000 miles, which is why we put in for a cruiser every year to try to mitigate the mileage and the repair costs on the cruisers. To that end, as we move forward and introduce these hybrids and change them out, very much like we did with the Crown Victorias years ago when we got away from the sedans, and the entire fleet now is the SUV Interceptors. We're going to do this. Our approach is going to be the same with the hybrids. So eventually, the whole fleet I foresee being all hybrids. So just in a matter of 4 vehicles, which is typically what we have on the street at any given time, if they're 4 hybrids, the math calculated on 3 shifts per day, with 4 of them will save 7,000 gallons of fuel a year, which equates to about $20,800 with 4 cars on the street per year, as opposed to what we're spending now. Meaning, to Councilor Rist's point, this one car, according to, and we're going to do our own study, an actual study of comparison of gas, but according to Ford's calculations, this one car will save $5,213 in the first year, and the price difference, again, to reiterate what Councilor Rist said, is $3,500 more than a standard gasoline SUV. And I know one other thing that came up on the subcommittee is, what is that saving for CO2? So for the first year, that'll save, this one hybrid will save 32,337 pounds of CO2. Back to my 4 cruisers on the street, in 1 year's time, it'll save 130,000 pounds of CO2 emission. So as much money as the city's going to save in fuel, we're also saving, doing our part to save the environment, at least with our police cruisers. So that's pretty much it from me.
I have just one more comment, and one of the things was when I turned it on today, I was trying to see if I did something wrong because it was on. It's on. So when they stop, they're supposed to keep their cruisers on, ready to go. If they stop and they get out, or I believe even if you pull somebody over, the cruiser stays on. It's on, but it's not giving out any CO2. It's just electric, so it's ready to go.
Right.
And that's fantastic. So that even saves more gas, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Because you don't have to have it idling anywhere.
I've been a skeptic for, as the council knows, I've been a skeptic for a long time.
Oh, really?
But most of my skepticism always came from performance and safety. And finally, there's a product that doesn't compromise performance, but more importantly, safety. And that's why I'm all in now. It makes good sense. I was telling a couple of councilors today, I couldn't make an argument against this. It just doesn't even make any sense.
Chief, yesterday, as I was speeding through the streets of Easthampton...
Again,
I asked you, like, how we're going to be measuring that $5,000 savings, and you talked about swapping them in. Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to measure that over time?
So we get our fuel at the DPW. It's they have fuel tanks down there, and they're all computer generated per cruiser. So each cruiser key has a key fob on it, and each officer has their own code to punch in every time they fill up. So we track the mileage and the fuel that goes into each cruiser. So I'm going to pick a gasoline line car when we take receipt of this hybrid cruiser, if it passes favorably tonight. At the same time, once we get that and we're gonna put it on the road, at the same time, we're gonna pick a cruiser, a regular gasoline cruiser that's working the same shifts in the same amount of time, and we're gonna compare the best we can with the averages of fill-ups and mileage, and have our own total at the end of the year, working with the DPW because it's their program, to give you real-world numbers, not just what Ford calculates.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. Councilor Lynch?
Thank you. Chief, we've had it in the city or whatever, this demo vehicle. Have you had other officers on your fleet, or your team talking about it? And is there good feedback? Is there any negative feedback? Anything that's come up as a concern with any of your team that would deter them from wanting it?
Great question. The police officers are skeptics, just as a general rule. So when we took delivery of the demo on Monday, and I put it in, and, let the guys and men and women drive it around. And as skeptical as they were, the feedback that we received was all positive. They couldn't believe that it performed just like the cruisers are used to driving, and they really didn't notice, as I did, and I think some of you that drove it. You don't notice when you're in battery mode and when you're not. The computer in it is just pretty magnificent. So the feedback performs very well, and the performance from Ford in the brochure, and I emailed the council as well. A study that the Los Angeles County Sheriffs did. This car actually outperformed, the hybrid actually outperformed the gasoline version of the SUV Interceptor. I think almost all areas. So the feedback from the officers has been fantastic. The literature's been fantastic, and again, the cost savings in CO2 is it's pretty remarkable to be where we are now.
Great.
Councilor Gomez?
Thank you, President Coniff. I just want to make a comment. I just want to say thanks for moving green to the city. I think you're the first department head asking for a hybrid, and I think that's amazing. And I think the other department head have to follow what the police departments are doing.
Thank you.
Again, we tried the vehicle, and it's amazing. I think what we're doing is just for saving money for the environment. I think it's huge, and I have to say thank you again for asking for this kind of vehicle that we're going to save the environment.
Thank you. And if anybody wants driving lessons, I would highly recommend Councilor Gomez as a emergency vehicle operation and control instructor.
Any other
Not
questions?
Councilor Coniff?
We didn't go far.
No, we didn't go far.
It's in her defense.
But I could have, but I decided not to. Any other questions? One more. Does Ford offer any, or any other department, police agencies, do they offer any comparisons of maintenance on these vehicles? Now, you mentioned the computer. Will that entail any sort of larger maintenance possibilities?
Another great question. So the vehicle's warranted, as is the powertrain, as is the computer portion, so it's warranted. So any maintenance that we would have done under the warranty period, we'll bring over to Marcotte, who are the experts. And in such time, we're hoping that once we take this vehicle in and get it down to our DPW motor pool, they're very good. I'm sure they'll do their own research on what they can handle and what they can't handle. So as I stand here, I don't have a definitive answer for you, but we're definitely going to work on getting those answers.
Okay. I think it's worthy of being, having a first one out there.
Right.
So I think it's still a great idea. Councilor Ralston?
When will you be getting the cruisers?
So after today, again, if the council votes favorably on it, we'll put the order in as soon as I get the requisition permission from audit and finance. And then the lead time on the car is probably going to be the better part of a month, month and a half.
Okay, that puts us about close to Earth Day. So I was wondering if the police department might consider doing an educational event for the community
Happily.
and sharing the data that you're going to be saving in terms of gas and carbon for community, and maybe get kids involved in learning about what the city's doing.
Happily, we'd love to do that. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Oh, Councilor Zarin.
Sorry, I forget if you mentioned this already. Forgive me, but so how many of these vehicles are being utilized by departments in Massachusetts so far?
There's several that have been rolled out. I don't have an exact number. I know Holyoke, I want to say they just bought 6 of them, and I know throughout from the eastern and coming west. We may very well be the first one in Hampshire County to have one of these, but they are rolling them out. They have been. The feedback to the company that we buy them from, MHQ, which is on a state bid, was a question we asked, has been very favorable. Because I also didn't want to be the first one in the Commonwealth to buy one of these.
Councilor Kuzinski?
Thank you. Chief Alberti, I know we spoke about this at least a year ago, and you were very enthusiastic and shared the information about Ford is going to be doing this. Let's go ahead and really look into this. I'm glad you did. I'm so happy for the city.
Thank you.
This is a good move for Easthampton, and I don't mind if we are first in Hampshire County. That's fine.
I think we are.
Ford has had considerable experience with hybrids already, so I think their transition to the Interceptor hybrid is.
And much credit goes to Councilor Derby and Councilor Gomez as well for
passing the original.
Keeping the arm on me to keep moving this forward. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is the other vehicle that's going to replace one of our detective cars is also a hybrid, the Ford Escape, which is considerably less money because it's a we don't have to put all the equipment in. It's a run-of-the-mill Ford Escape, but a hybrid. So we'll save. I don't have the analysis of the cost savings there, but it'll be. I'm sure it'll be as significant.
That's great.
So this is a very cool moment. It's been 14 years in the making.
I say, yeah, we've discussed this a lot of years, Councilor Derby.
So, we passed this ordinance 14 years ago. And this is the first time. So thank you for breaking the ice, and let's hope we can keep moving in this direction.
Absolutely.
A couple other things. The vehicles that they're removing are being passed down to the Park and Rec Department and to the School Maintenance Department, so they're still being used.
Right.
They're still in pretty good shape, even though they have high miles, so we do recycle our vehicles. We don't trade them in.
Right.
They basically, I guess, they use them until they die.
Yes.
In those other departments. And they don't have the same kind of use need that Park and Rec uses them in the park, so.
I will tell you the vehicle that Park and Rec is replacing was one of the newest detective cars that Detective Sergeant Darrell Stoddard ordered, and they're still driving it around.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And Ford has the market on this. I asked the chief today, is there any other manufacturer out there that is competing for police business? He said no, and I think that's unfortunate because that would obviously drive the cost down, but in case anybody wanted to know if they did their due diligence and looked at other brands, there isn't one.
And you'll see in the study that I sent to the council today, in the road test, you'll see that Ford had the They have an Echo Boost, which performed very well too, but the savings on the hybrid, but there were no other hybrids that were in the testing because they don't make any.
How many miles does a cruiser get a year-ish?
The average, I would say, is probably 25,000. 25 to 30,000 would be a safe average, and we work hard to try to stagger the cruisers from shifts, so it's not on the road 24/7. We'll have them park a particular cruiser on a 4 to 12 shift and drive a different cruiser than they would on the day shift and the midnight shift.
So you're trying to get 4 or 5 years out of them? Is that?
That's a pretty good average. It's probably longer than I would want, but it is what it is.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's not, mileage isn't the only indicator though, because idle time I think is like what 60%.
Oh yeah.
Of the amount of so, and I think these really cut down on the idling emissions, which is like one of the best parts of this. So
great point, because when a cruiser's sitting on the side of the road running radar in any given neighborhood, because every street in the city there's speeders on, they won't be running.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Councilor Zarek?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I personally, as someone who also embraces green technologies, I was a little skeptical as well, even with the knowledge of the power and performance of a foreign motor vehicle, having driven one for over 30 years. And I was particularly impressed. I don't have much knowledge about police vehicles, driving them, at least not with explicit permission from the police department. I was particularly impressed with the way that the vehicle performed in terms of acceleration, handling, stopping power. And as Chief Alberti pointed out too, there were times when we were driving the vehicle and you'd look down and it was just being operated off a battery. So not just saving on idling, but just general runtime, that we won't be polluting the environment while these are being operated on the road. It was a very impressive vehicle to drive. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
Councilor Krasinski?
One technical question has to do with the lights. When the lights go on, the generator does kick in. The car engine starts, right?
Yes.
It does. Okay.
Yeah. And I guess to that point too, the engine charges the battery, so it's not, we don't have to plug it in. So it's not like a true electric car where it's got to get recharged in an electric station. The motor itself will recharge the batteries to operate the cruiser.
Councilor Lynch?
Last one.
Well, this is not technical.
Has anybody looked into any either rebates or grants or anything, with converting over to energy efficient hybrid vehicles or anything like that?
Good question. The only answer I have for you is that this is the state bid price, so the pricing is dictated by the state. Okay. I know there are some grant programs for some other vehicles and some rebates. The mayor and I are actually discussing one for an electric bike, but nothing that I'm aware of specifically to the cruisers on a state bid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Rose?
Public?
Oh, sure. Anyone in the public have any questions, comments? Okay.
Okay, I will make a motion. This is approved 2-0 by the Finance Committee. I make a motion that the full council approve the following appropriation. The amount requested is $93,869.20 to be transferred from free cash. $93,869.20 to be transferred to Police Hybrid Cruisers account, $93,869.20 for the purpose of purchasing one 2020 Ford Escape SE unmarked cruiser for Detective Bureau, $30,623, and the purchase of one 2020 Ford Police Interceptor Utility K8A marked cruiser, $63,246.20.
Second.
Motion is second to approve 2 hybrid cruisers for the police department. Any further discussion?
Just real quick, one of the stipulations of the ordinance was that it would be conspicuously marked as a hybrid vehicle. And I see the one on the here that it shows that it is. I just want to make sure that we remember remember that piece.
We're not taking a label off.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
I'm going to jump to the next
He gets
police
to do his
department one because he's here.
Okay.
That would be the shortfall in the police FY20 budget. This is because primarily for a number of reasons. One of them is we've had 4 officers either resign or retire this year, and due to contractual obligation, they have vacation payout and sick leave buyback, which pays for a lot of it. Also, we've had to pay for academy tuition at $3,000 per officer for 2 new officers, and mandatory academy equipment for the officers. That's $11,000 for 2 new officers. And my notes say that we've hired 2 full-time officers from Northampton. Is that?
That's correct.
Am I correct? I'm
Right.
not.
That's correct.
Okay, so they're already on the job.
Correct. Go
ahead.
So we've replaced. So we've had 2 retirements and 2 resignations. Of those 4 openings, we took 2 laterals from Northampton who were working out just absolutely amazing. Historically, we don't lateral people into our police department officers. Typically, we would hire from our specials pool, where we cultivate them, train them the Easthampton Police Department way. So we're a little hesitant on we looked at a couple of laterals. We're hesitant on it for all the historical reasons. I was a special. My entire police department, for the most part, worked as specials here. So if you come in the door as a brand new special, you could be the chief someday. In this instant, because we were down 4 officers almost back to back to back, we wanted to look at other avenues. The 2 officers from Northampton had not been on the job a long time, so they haven't really established any other police department's bad habits. Matter of fact, they went to the academy with 2 of our recent graduates who advocated very much for them. So I saved 2 academy tuitions by lateraling them in. In the meantime, we hired 2 of our specials, so I did kind of a hybrid, if you will. Nothing.
Well done.
Thank you. So we took.
You didn't mark it, we couldn't count.
No, I know. We took 2 laterals, and then I had 2 of my specials that are currently in the police academy now. They're in, I think, week 4 or 5. And this tuition, because we can't budget for these things, this tuition is for the 2 that are in the academy, but I saved the equal amount of money by transferring 2 in and not having to put 4 in the academy. And surprisingly, they're working out really, really well. They melded very well with our organization.
Questions?
Any questions from the public? No?
Okay, that was fast. I make a motion that the full council approve the following appropriation. The amount is $93,626.93 to be transferred from the reserve fund, to be transferred to, I only have account numbers, so I'm not quite sure what these are titled, but $11,000 I believe is for the, I'm going to say for the academy expenses. $22,508 is the accrued vacation expense, and $60,118.22 is the accrued sick time expense to cover the shortfall in the police FY20 budget due to unforeseen expenses, the retirement resignation of 4 officers, and as a result, sending 2 new officers to the police academy.
Second.
Motion is second for an appropriation of $93,626.93 to cover the shortfall in the police FY20 budget. Any further discussion? Chief?
I'd like to offer one more thing that I neglected to point out, if I may. So I had 4 senior officers, and 1 was a senior detective that left the department. We've hired 4 junior patrolmen at the step 1 rate, so there's clearly a savings there between the 4. So just so the council's aware, that savings between the 2, I'm putting towards the amount of money that I have to fund in overtime to fill the 2 officers that are in the academy. So I have 2 officers in the academy now, so I have to backfill those 2 positions. for the most part, I'm doing it with specials at a significantly discounted rate of a full-time police officer. But I just wanted the council to know that we're doing our due diligence and the difference in that savings and putting it where I really, really need it in an effort not to have to come back to the council and look for overtime down the road.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Now, the next appropriation is for $391,000. This is, I think most of us, or many of us, were here for the Union Street public hearing. The capital project requires construction oversight, and the engineer, and I forget your name, you're from VHP.
Matt Chase.
Pat Chase is here. We are hiring Pat.
Matt.
Matt? Matt. How could I forget that? It's my son's name. This is not part of our share, it's the design. The state and federal funding does not pay for the design of the Union Street project, but beyond that, the company that Matt represents covers all the design needs throughout the length of the project, and basically they are the city's project manager on this. Correct me if I'm wrong. On call by the city engineering department if there's any issues. This is VHP, which is the name of the company, does the final punch list. There will begin phase 2, which is 3D designing. They have done, VHB, the company that Matt represents, that we are basically hiring, has done $100 million of quite a bit of projects in Worcester and Springfield, and they're very experienced. So they can't use all of retained earnings, so we took some of this out of capital stabilization. What else did I want to say? There's $1,348,678 left in retained earnings after this. Am I right, Val? I think I am. That's after the fact. Anyway, I invite Matt up if anybody who has any questions. Basically, they are going to design and oversee the project for the city. It's necessary, or we don't get the money from the state. So,
Hi, good evening.
you want to state your name and for the record and everything.
Matt Chase with VHB, the designer for the Union Street project. I can reiterate everything, I guess, that you said and clarify, I guess, maybe a few points. I've been with VHB for 25 years, or 20 years, been doing this for about 25 years. The $100 million that you referenced was construction cost budgets that we bid out over the last probably year and a half, my team in Central and Western Mass. So we do have quite a bit of experience. The design, we just had our public hearing on January 13th. I think that went well. It's a 5-step design process with Mass DOT. We get into the 3-dimensional design phase as part of this next submission. There's 5 total submissions with Mass DOT, kind of broken out over the next 2 years. This contract will cover all the way through construction phase services. The project's slated to go out to bid and advertise in the fall of '21, and then construction should start in the spring of '22, and it will probably be maybe a year, one and a half construction seasons, depending on weather conditions and things like that. So, you know, this contract should get you for the next 3.5 years of my services to assist City Engineering Department, DPW, and navigate this process through Mass DOT and capitalize on the $3.3 million that are available from state and federal funding.
Matt, you had mentioned that there's going to be phases of design. Is that what you said? 5 iterations?
Correct. So there's...
Are those going to be publicly known, or will you work that out with the DPW, the tweaks to them?
Sure. We'll work that out with DPW. I think they've been posting things online, if I remember correctly, on the 25% design submission. We did have a series of outreach meetings before we reached our meeting on January 13th. We will have a series of more meetings and outreach meetings with abutters. We'll probably have at least a couple more information meetings after this next design submission. The next design, the design submission we just made was 25% design. The next submission is a 75% design. The next submission after that's 100%, and then there's usually 2 submissions for what they call a plan, spec, and estimate design submission, or PS&E. And then from there it goes bidding, advertisement, and goes out to construction from that point forward. So it is a pretty extensive process to capitalize on the funding that's available from the state and federal programs.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions from anyone? Councilor Zare?
This might be premature, so you can tell me if it's premature. So one of the obviously issues in the city right now that's being discussed broadly and certainly in public safety and came up with the recent upgrades to Cottage Street is pedestrian safety. And so are you able to comment at all about potential plans for how creating pedestrian-friendly corridors and plans for upgrading our current crosswalks and such would fit into the plans, new technologies for pedestrian crosswalks and such?
Sure. The proposed plan includes several rapid flashing beacons, which a few of them were just installed on Cottage Street. We've been working closely with DPW to make sure that we're implementing practices that can be easily maintained and carried forward for the upcoming years. So we're giving a lot of thought to that, but we're also making sure that we're improving the visibility of the crosswalks and providing multimodal accommodations for all users, realizing the sensitivity of the downtown area, the congestion, the businesses, the activity, and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that is definitely something that we will go through. There are design requirements that we need to meet to capitalize on those fundings, so we have to provide accommodations for all users, bikes, peds, and vehicles. Union Street is part of the National Highway System Network, so there's some requirements there that need to be followed and met from a federal highway perspective, but we went through a lot of that process as part of this first submission. So we've already identified, you know, the cross-section of the roadway, the accommodations for bikes, and now we're going to further develop that design and prepare the bid documents for advertisement.
Any other questions, Councilor Lynch?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to help me with my math. I'm a math guy.
Sure.
How long have you been involved with the project, would you say?
2017, maybe?
Okay, so that was like the start. So in 2017, we approved an appropriation for $450,000 that in the minutes, that I wasn't a part of the council then, showed that it would take us through the end of the project. I emailed Joe Pipp on that to ask what that amount of money was for, seeing that that was supposed to take us through that. And he got back to me and said it was going to be the 25% mark of the project. So that would mean our part of the payment would be $1.3 million or so in that ballpark. So now reading this says that's going to take us from that 25% mark through 100%. Is this the last appropriation that the city's going to have to come out with in front? Do you know? What was said that was unknown was easements and temporary or permanent easements and things like that. So I don't know if you can clarify the spending and where we're going.
Sure. So I helped develop that number, and that was just kind of based on the information we had at that time. At that time, it was just a vision. We didn't have any survey. We didn't have any input from the public. We didn't know how extensive water and sewer improvements were going to be, or what we were going to get into as part of the design. So that was purely just kind of ballparking based on where we were at that time. We've recently got survey. One of the things we're striving to do for this project is raise the profile of the roadway, so we're designing and taking out the extensive slopes of the sidewalks that are out there today. So from that perspective, you know, we run into challenges as the design practices change with Mass DOT and require further submissions of different reports to justify the design and such like that. So that was kind of our planning scope. What we've appropriated now from our design perspective to get us through construction phase services, I don't anticipate having to come back for additional design for me. As far as the right-of-way process, that is something that the city's responsible for property acquisitions, for the easements to do that, you know, this construction work. For instance, a good part of the sidewalks that are out there today, the layout line goes right down the middle of the sidewalk. So half of the sidewalk's owned by the property owner, half is owned by the city. So to do the work on the private property, there has to be an agreement that gets, you know, put in place. We won't know until after the 75% design stage, where the city will be responsible for bringing in an appraiser to give kind of estimated or a cost for those easements. But we've worked with several communities, and Dan and I have been strategizing this already, where a project of this could definitely be something where you would see a lot of donations from business owners because of the improvements in the aesthetics that are being made just in their front doors. We've implemented a few outreach techniques and things that we can capitalize on that. So to hone in on what that cost might be, we don't usually get involved in those costs. So I can't really comment on what that would be. It varies widely based on market value and the time when those easements are being acquired. So if you have an appraiser that comes on board and it's, a year from now, it's whatever the market's driving for sales of comps, I guess, in the Union Street area. So that is something that we'll just have to continue to work with the city to identify what that cost might be. But at this point, I don't know what that is. But it wouldn't be an additional design cost from us.
Okay.
Just a question was raised at the meeting, Bill. The total cost was estimated $4.7 million for this project. $1.4 million is our cost. This is not part of that. Our cost includes those easements and water and sewer upgrades and things like that. So when this comes up for construction, we have to come up with that part of it. And that was an estimate, so I don't believe they have a good figure until we get the designs done, right?
And I would think that our water and sewer costs that we're carrying as that participating cost is somewhat conservative at this point. We are working with DPW and engineering. They are videoing a lot of the sewer, and we can come up with strategies to reduce those costs or come up with some strategy, that assumes like full replacement. And if we can come to some agreement to what the best practice is to either line the pipe or reuse some of the structures that are out there today, there'd be some cost savings there. Again, I don't know what that cost saving is, but it's my job to put out the best project within the budget that we have and do the best we can to, work with you to, what seems reasonable is what we want to put forward and within the budget that you have.
A couple of questions. I imagine it's not temporary easements you're primarily talking about. You're looking at permanent easements?
There are some permanent easements. A lot of those would be a result of adding, for instance, a crosswalk right out here on Cottage Street with a leg where there is no crosswalk. We might need an easement to extend the sidewalk and a wheelchair ramp on that far side, and things like that. But the temporary easements, from an area standpoint, I think far exceed the permanent easements because the nature of the corridor is so constrained that there's really no way to really widen and take any more property because buildings are right at the back of sidewalk.
So this would be a work construction type easement?
There'd be, the temporary easements would be a construction easement. They usually, with this project, they could last 3 years. And that factors into some of the pricing as well. So if we think that this could be one construction season, then maybe it's a 2-year easement, but it's something that we work through with Mass DOT, and there's a right-of-way process that has to be followed with them, and all that has to be certified.
I would think you're right. I think we have something to sell to the landowners, that this is an improvement that'll benefit your operation, your business, your tenants, whatever.
And we just are, we have a lot of experience in doing this. We just are finishing up a 1.5 mile project out in the Berkshires. They had about 100 easements that they needed to take, and they only had to pay for 15. They did a really good job, and we were part of that to do outreach and get donations for the project. And it was one of those projects where everybody's very excited that it would be moving forward, and I think this clearly is one of those projects.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you can answer this, sir, so it might be more of a broad question for everyone here can answer this, but if we're spending money to make water sewer upgrades along the Union Street corridor, does that come out of the estimates that are being proposed more broadly to the city for the water sewer upgrades that are going to need to be made, that are at kind of the forefront discussion right now in our city? I don't know if you're going to have an answer for that.
I think it was part of a discussion we had that it was pulled out of that list of projects, but more importantly, we were talking about making sure we appropriated the money for this work, even though it's being pulled out of that list, I guess, if that makes sense.
So this is reducing the overall capital expenditure that's going to need to occur for our our water sewer.
Let's just put it in a different bucket.
Well, I understand that, but
Yeah.
it reduces the burden on our residents by increasing fees.
Well, we still have to pay 1.4 million, and that's part of it, so.
I do understand that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thanks.
Anyone from the public have any questions? Come on up. Annette?
Of course I have to. Annette Siegel, Mutter Street.
Wait until you get to the
Okay, I'm
microphone.
sorry. Annette Siegel, Mutter Street. I'm not sure if you can, were you in oversight of the Cottage Street? No.
We were part of it, but we didn't oversee it.
Okay. My question is, has anybody walked the sidewalks on Cottage Street? They are totally crumbling.
Yes.
They're less than 6 months old.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and so everyone is aware of that, so I'm hoping the Union Street crosswalks don't fall apart within 6 months. Where I stand, maybe it's because the crosswalk doesn't like me, but it's total, I mean, there's just a pile of crumbs there from the crosswalk, so I'm hoping, that Union Street doesn't turn into Cottage Street.
I can speak to that a little bit if you want.
Yeah.
Warranty on that?
I know, that's what I talked to Joe, when I first saw that it was all falling apart, just to say that, does anybody know this? Because this is less than a year old, and it's already in rough shape, so, we should, although he came by today and he made this little circle with an X, so I don't know if they're gonna come back and redo it, but yeah, I just wanted to have that on the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, with the contractor that did that, it should be warranted to some extent, and I know there has been some instances of this happening on projects with sidewalks. There are some measures that can be put in place to fix that very easily. I know I've been working with Dan and DPW on trying to identify a way to work with the contractor to make sure that that gets addressed, and it won't happen with the Union Street project. It'll make sure that it gets addressed as part of that project.
I was just recognizing you.
Oh, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a little process. It's fine.
What is causing them to crumble?
Some say it's the ash that's in the concrete, that it's the percentage is not accurate, and some manufactured plants might have had something that was not working, and so when the salt and the snow store up on those first couple feet, eventually the salt just pits it and erodes on it. Nobody exactly knows exactly where it's something that even the state's trying to work out to try to iron out what is the issue. I know that there is a quick fix on how to fix it, but it's happened on a few projects, not a lot, but on a few projects, and nobody can pinpoint exactly what the issue is. But
So you don't know if it's the nature of the work or the actual materials they're using, or?
Yeah, I think it has to do with something with the material received from the plants, but I don't know that, I can't confirm or deny that. I've been trying to figure out with the state what the issue is on some other projects that happened within the last winter on this as well. But, nobody has the state doesn't have an answer yet, but I think they're trying to figure out how to address it. And some of the specifications and things that I shared with engineering this week are some of the things that the state's looking to mitigate. And I know some communities are also telling the state to rip up the sidewalk and put a new sidewalk down. So there is a little bit of back and forth, and I don't know exactly what the issue is. I don't think the state knows exactly what the issue is, but it seems like it could be a result of the mix from the plant.
Was it something that just happened in this past year, or is this a normal?
It's something that's happened within this. It started to happen a little bit the year before, but it happened again this year. So it's just recently, though, that this has happened within the last 2 seasons.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So I would have, directing my question to the chair, but Mass DOT just laid out a new process for exceptions to street design, to recognize unique characteristics of every road under this project. And my question to maybe Matt or Dan is that will we be able to access that exception process if needed, if indicated, between the 25% and and the 60% design. And I'll just go quick context. We're in the middle of, on Route 10, across from River Valley, seeking one of those exceptions because it really doesn't make sense to do a complete street bike lane or whatnot for 600 feet when, you know, it should be a more holistic, longer project. But we just were briefed at PVPC around this exception process to make it unique or more fitting for a particular location. I didn't know as we go forward if we're locked into what we have because of the 25% or if there's an opportunity to access this exception report. I don't know.
Sure. So there is a new exception process, and we had known that it was coming last year. We did go through a design exception process for 25% design to get the cross-section that's established now. There is some room that we can work, I think, within the proposed curb line to create a cross-section that would work. I think we could make some changes to some areas. I know I think to put your question in context, I think it might have to do with removal of on-street parking versus PEDs and accommodations. Unfortunately, I mean, we looked at everything under the sun to take advantage of this new regulation that is now being implemented, but we had enough knowledge of it coming out that we started to look at it 6-8 months ago. And it was things that we talked with Mass DOT and we tried to evaluate those kinds of features. But when you need an 8-foot parking lane and you have buildings that back of sidewalks, saving 3 feet on a cross-section doesn't get you back the 8 feet. So we did look extensively at that. We do have a design exception that's approved. There might be some wiggle room in there for the section from Manhattan up to High Street where, you know, we have a Sherrill situation and a wide bike lane that we could play with the dimensions of those lanes and shoulders, but moving the curb and changing it and gaining 2 or 3 feet here or there to change a whole redesign is not going to get us the on-street parking back. And I don't know if that answers your question or if that's where that was going, but
Any other questions?
I have something else entirely. Ma'am.
You may.
Valerie, would you please come forward? Val. I wanted to inform that I have the original document, which was a free cash request, and this was changed to capital stabilization. And at the meeting, I requested, the reason for that was we wanted to protect free cash in case we needed it. Number one, in case we had more snow, crossing our fingers. We may not have more snow. And at the meeting, I also asked if this would, use of this capital stabilization, we know that those stabilization accounts are looked on by bonding agencies. We have them, and they like to have the money in them. But you said at the meeting, and I don't know if there'll be questions about it, that this will not damage our bond rating because we are above the threshold by using capital stabilization. Do you want to expand on that anymore at this time? Because I appreciate that we are using capital stabilization. It allows the free cash, if we have any left, to be moved into that tax stabilization account at the end of the year. If we don't need it, that's up to the mayor, but it's available, which is one of the reasons I appreciated using this out of capital stabilization.
Val Bernier, City Auditor. Yeah, we probably could spend about at least $500,000 from the capital stabilization before we would go below what our financial policy says we're going to have in it. And we put extra in at the beginning of this fiscal year, so we're in good shape for that. As far as the free cash goes, after this we would have $381,513.20. And we just put in a request with Barbara for $100,000 for snow and ice and $100,000 for the tax rate stabilization. So hopefully that'll get through in time for the budget. And that leaves $87,644 for, you know, if we need Medicare or something shown.
Emergency.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And
was I correct
capital
that the-
stabilization still has After this, $1,997,490.10.
And was I correct? The figure you gave us for retained earnings was still $1,348,678 left after this in retained
Exactly.
earnings? Okay. Thank you, Val. That's very
You're
important
welcome.
information. Barbara, may I have the free cash one. In case the figures are different, can I have the one to read that you're going to have us sign tonight? Because I have the original one before the amended one. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
They're not any different. Okay. I'm done. I don't know if there's anybody
All right,
else.
any other questions? Counselor Lynch?
I just have one more, Dan. I just want clarity on this because in the paperwork here, it says the amendment covers from the 25% design through construction completion. So to me, that means that there's no more expense, and you're telling me that we're going to look at 1.4 million later?
Design expense.
What's
Design
construction completion? I mean, that to me is completing.
Design oversight.
Through to construction complete.
Yes. They are the project managers.
Yep.
They are going to supervise construction all the way through the end. This does not include what the cost
Physical
of construction is. It's two separate things. So this particular...
It's one in my brain, apparently. I got
It's
you.
okay, but
I got you.
it's important. There's two separate things. There's construction cost, which is sewer and water for us, easements, et cetera. And there's the design cost, which locally we have to pay for.
Gotcha.
And that includes their oversight, which is great. We have a project manager that's got the city's interests in mind. Protect us from crumbling concrete.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, Counselor Riss?
Nobody else? I'm ready to go. Thank you, Matt. I hereby ask the City Council for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $391,800 to be transferred from retained earnings, $120,000. Capital Stabilization Fund number 85, $271,800 to be transferred to Union Street Capital Project, $271,800 and $120,000 for the following purpose: to complete the design of the Union Street corridor and provide for construction oversight.
Second.
Motion is second for appropriation of $391,800 to complete the design of the Union Street corridor and provide construction oversight. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Madam President, I move the public hearings be closed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, back to committee reports. Actually, no. We are going to move on to the planning department. Mr. Bagg has some updates on a couple of critical projects he wants to present to us.
Great, thank you. I'm Jeff Baggett, City Planner. I have two items tonight. So the first one is related to a detour plan for Ferry Street, and I have access to Chief Alberti, as well as the city's consultant for this project are here, and I am here to share information with the City Council, and I want to portray sort of an interdepartmental discussion before it becomes a thing out in the world. So it's an effort that we're trying to make sure that you as city councilors have information that is going to be useful to you in responding to people that you interact with out in our community. That is where we're all probably going to need to roll up our sleeves a little bit, and we're hoping that with this information you can help us share crucial information about the project. So what we're trying to do is send out a press release tomorrow that would be accompanied by this map, which we're describing as kind of a user-friendly map for a detour that is set to take effect on April 1st. So we're trying to be prepared to give information ahead of time with a reasonable amount of time for people to understand what's going on and prepare as may be needed. I will hand out in a moment the draft press release. we'll take this opportunity to kind of go over some of the nuts and bolts. And we are building a web page, so you'll see easthamptonma.gov/Ferry Street is a place where this will exist sometime tomorrow, and will be our place to put ongoing information as this project, is really going to ramp up in several weeks. The program this detour program has two specific goals. The first being that we will see a significant speeding up of the completion of this project by doing this. The second is that we will increase safety of people in the area, motorists. And so this has been a discussion with public safety, so police, fire, as well as DPW, the planning department. Yeah, that'll be great. Yep. And here is also a copy of the press release. So, as you get in some information passed out, so I'm going to just read a little bit. But so, as a result of the road work taking place, Ferry Street, from Emerald Place to the Manhan Rail Trail crossing will be closed to vehicular traffic beginning April 1st. The road is anticipated to be closed for approximately 6 months. A detour will be in place to redirect regular traffic along with a separate truck route. Motorists will be advised to expect delays, occasional lane closures on Lovefield, and generally to avoid the intersection of Pleasant Street, O'Neill Street, and Ferry Street. The contractor will begin placing detour signs at specific intersections over the next few weeks. And with that, what we're expecting is a fairly elaborate sign program. And as they go out and install them, they're going to be covered until which time we're ready to open up the detour plan itself. You just got handed out the detour map, and we're going to be advising motorists to seek alternate routes. So I'll pause for a moment. I mean, I think what we're looking at is the area is heavily traveled, and we have a couple buckets of people who are going to travel through the area. We have Easthampton residents who, are our primary target. So we think that, the information provided, and Chief Alberti can explain this too, that people who frequent the area will experience the detour and will find another route. And what we're trying to do with the 6-month program is make it clear to people that this is a place that's going to be the same for 6 months. We talked about other options. We talked about variations of it, and it's really just going to be something that's too confusing. We have larger operations, larger business owners who we're in the process of reaching out to, and the mill owners are the closest in proximity. We do have some larger manufacturing companies, so we have an outreach plan to speak with them, make sure that they have this plan available. The mill owners generally have agreed to distribute this information to their tenants. What I will spare you of is, we're a reminder that this is a $3.5 million MassWorks grant to improve the public infrastructure and to support the redevelopment at 1 Ferry Street. The improvements will include a mini roundabout. We're going to be moving some overhead wires underground along Lower Mill Pond, and we're going to be upgrading water and sewer and stormwater in that vicinity, which is important. The pedestrian walkway that's going to be adjacent to Lower Mill Pond is going to be a unique feature and an asset. And then we talked a little bit about other things earlier, but the Manhan Rail Trail crossing in this area is going to be upgraded significantly to be a much safer place to travel through. So again, those are some of the reasons why this project exists. A couple of the notes that you'll see in the press release are that the rail trail is going to remain open. You'll see out there today, the contractor last fall already moved there's a temporary bike path, so that'll be in place throughout the construction activity, which was a key component of what we were trying to do with the project, is to keep that open. Millside Park will remain open with access from Ferry Street. And so, there's a level of detail here where there'll be police officers directing traffic. we are looking at the intersection of Pleasant Street, O'Neill, and Ferry as an area where there will be one-way traffic. So there'll be police officer details there during construction hours. So that is going to be where you'll see significant delays. But the conversation was that that route has to be open to some extent. And then during the evening hours, the road will be prepped for two-way traffic. So we believe that this is an important thing to do at this point. The contractor is encouraging that if implemented on April 1st, weather is one of the factors that is a variable that you just can't predict. But they're talking about substantially complete construction by the end of November, which will be much quicker completion than we were originally envisioning. In speaking with DPW, they were careful to remind me that substantial completion probably means different things to different people. So this is passable. Pedestrian access will be open. Things like benches and lighting, final landscaping may not be in place, and it all depends on the weather. So we do expect some activity to be occurring still in the spring, but will be substantially complete, and that's a highly desirable feature of this detour plan. So I think I covered everything I was hoping to. I guess there'll be questions, and we have a couple people here. So I may defer to, depending on your question.
I'm just going to ask real quick. So the way this map is, it looks like at that intersection, it's not so if you're coming down O'Neill and Love Street and you want to get to Pleasant, can you continue on, or is it going to stop and then you got to turn around? Like, does that road all the way continue?
Through Love Field and Pleasant Street?
Love Field, and how it's like one...
The blue line and the orange line don't connect there.
Yeah.
So on our map, so.
It's not connected, so...
However, there will be potential for delays there, and that is a
But you
one-lane.
can still traverse it.
It will be traversable, and that's a key feature. But I think, especially residents who will experience this during their normal travel, especially to and from work, you may quickly realize that you don't want to take that route, and there is the circuitous route around.
In the press release, is there some way to, if you use this map, to draw a big circle around that intersection and say, flag it as being a red flag with delays, so that folks immediately pops up to people.
Yep.
But there's a plan view of that as well.
We don't have that. We don't have it as part of
Great question.
this package.
They don't. They understand.
Yeah.
It didn't pop up to me automatically.
Right. Yep. So two things. Chief Alberti is mentioning that there is a more detailed view of this area, which we could probably incorporate into this map, which we want people to have. We want people to be able to access this map. So I think the notation around that intersection as yellow, perhaps, as an area that could be subject to delays would be important. And then Paul from McMahon Associates mentioned that we are going to use variable message board signs. So those are the larger electronic boards that are movable. And so, our process of discussion was that we want to start to get the information out now, and we wanted to have the opportunity to inform you as the City Council that this is happening, and then push out the information tomorrow. So we're hoping that the word will get out through our media sources that are really good at covering things happening. And then at the appropriate time, whether it's 2 weeks or 1 week before, the detour signs will, the covers will come off, and we'll do another outreach program. All the while, we'll have some information available online.
Wow. Can I get these guys first? Councilor Gomez?
Thank you, President Conniff. I have a few questions.
You can have one.
One now, and then I'll like later after the other councilors. The first one is the city going to notify the neighbors in the area, and how? And if the answer is yes, how and when? Because the population there is a lot, and I think it's a way, if we can find a way to notify the neighbors in the area, will be good, instead of just waking up one day, and because probably some of them they have Facebook, some of them they can read the paper, but the other neighbors, how they're going to find out if that street's going to be closed?
So if I may, so Councilor, the answer to your question is, at least from my perspective, and I'm sure Jeff's, we're going to notify everybody we can with this broadcast tomorrow and pushing it out through all of our social media. One thing that I would suggest that we do is utilize our Code Red system, and in that Code Red system we can put the website, which will be consistently and constantly updated as this project moves along, as the catch-all to go to get continuous updates on the project. And quite frankly, we can do Code Red in an area, but quite frankly, I would blast it out to the whole city, just so everybody's aware of, in addition to the press release, but also aware that this is the one-stop shop website that you can go to get the real-time updates as the project moves along. And just to reiterate what Jeff was saying is, certainly the purpose of this is because I'm quite confident that the councilors are all going to get bombarded by the constituents on this. So we wanted to make sure that we got you guys out ahead of this before we plaster it out. And then we'll make, if there's any modifications or thoughts that the council has, we could integrate into this to Councilor Krasinski's point of that, the blow-up map, it exists, a blow-up map of that area. Something that we should probably attach to this as we send it out. Did that answer question one, Councilor Gomez?
I'm going to cycle through. Councilor Lynch?
All right, I'll do my one. And you may have covered it, Jeff. I'm just a little confused. Is Northampton Street going to be one way and O'Neill Street going to be one way? Is that like, you only have one arrow going in the flow of traffic the way I look at it? So I'm reading the map as Northampton Street and O'Neill Street and Pleasant Street all being one way, because then you look at Clapp Street and Ferry Street, they have both direction arrows. I'm just looking at...
Northampton Street absolutely won't be one way.
Yeah, good. I would then question why.
Yeah, let me start there. So I guess the way that the arrows are, particularly on Lovefield and Pleasant, is showing really the truck route and the traffic route, that if you're at that intersection, you can go both ways, because it is going to be two-way traffic. But really, the blue is more for the trucks, so that the trucks really avoid that area altogether. We don't want the trucks on Ferry, Parsons, Everett, Clapp, Fort. Like, we want to keep them clearly away from there. But all of that will be two-way traffic, including Lovefield to Pleasant Street. To a degree, when they start changing the road, we'll have police officers out there that will be mitigating one-way traffic. But it's two-way traffic, but one side first, the other, we've all been through it. The other thing I'll mention is, for those that have been around as long as some of us have, closing this section of Ferry Street reminds me very much of when we closed the Northampton Street Bridge. It took a little adjusting, but everybody figured out, okay, this is the way I got to go, and particularly the residents that are here. And we didn't have Jeff at the time, so on the Northampton Street, we didn't get this blasted out to anybody. It was you're at your own peril trying to get around town. So I love where we are now with Jeff. This is great. They've done a great job. And the other thing I think is very important is, although it's going to expedite the project, it's also going to expedite the irritation, longevity of the community.
Councilor Riss.
You mentioned message boards, and I wanted to say that I remember we had those message boards up maybe for the bridge, but also for, I think something was going on the mountain, that if you can put those up a few weeks ahead of time in 3 points, saying as of April 1st, major detour, okay? And even on that, maybe look at the website, but if that's constantly rotating, it'll tell people to expect this, because it's the people that travel there all the time. Avoid this intersection, April 1st detour.
Right. The map that I spared you of, I don't know if... there is another map, which I think the mayor wanted to say something. There is an elaborate sign system that will accompany this. And so this is just an example. This was the truck route. There is a sign system that will be put in place to make sure that people are aware of how to get through the entire detour. So we're paying special attention to making sure that this is not a detour where you often see a detour sign and then you're left in the abyss. So we feel like this is a plan that's important to implement. I think. Do you want me to? Do you want to respond to anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to this map and the legend very clearly, so when you're looking at the black arrows, that doesn't suggest one way, but it suggests a flow of detour. That'll be coupled with a sign system. So when you're talking about the Mill District and Pleasant Green, you're looking at a neighborhood that will have signs well in advance on top of social media and the website, to walk folks through. So.
Okay.
I mean, for me, it shows one way, but I was college educated, but
I would point to the legend.
I look at the legend, yeah, I get it, but
Detour
I'm just saying, it
It's a
might confuse some people.
Huh?
It might confuse people, that's all I'm saying. Whatever, that's fine.
Councilor Kwasinski, did you have another question?
I was just wondering if Lovefield Street, further up where it intersects with Route 10, was there a reason why there isn't any flow in that direction to get to places on East Street, Ferry Street, in New City, et cetera, or to even go through the entire city and get to the other side of the city entirely?
So, Councilor, to which color do you speak?
I see direction, I see an orange and blue lines on O'Neill and Clapp. Clapp, it would seem to me, if I were coming from Northampton and I wanted to get to New City, the fastest way might very well be to take a left onto Lovefield Street off of Route 10 and continue all the way through there till I got to Clapp Street, and then take a left there and get to New City. And also anyone exiting from New City to go to Northampton could have two routes, East Street or to go a Clapp Street to Lovefield.
Have you driven that Lovefield section?
I have.
Yeah, that would not be the way.
I just didn't know if there was good reason not to have directed that, because that would take some pressure off folks being in the center of town and on Pleasant Street.
My answer to that would be that section of Lovefield Street is a nightmare. A. B. The traffic's controlled at the end of Union Street with a traffic light, as opposed to backing up traffic and then trying to get traffic out, like that flow of traffic on at the end of Lovefield to try to get out onto Route 10 would be problematic.
To go to Northampton to take a right, you think?
You could easily back up traffic.
I think we'll be backing up traffic here. So, so that was just one question. And the other one had to do with Code Red, and when the suggestion was to use Code Red, was there some cost with Code Red that we have that plays into this if it's not an emergency? I remember that was brought up 3
yes,
months
there's a
ago or
cost,
so.
and that cost would be absorbed by the grant, and traffic mitigation.
Okay.
It wouldn't come out of Jim.
And how those, and to piggyback off of the mayor, how those are broadcast. If it's a non-emergency, there's a cost associated to it. But Code Red told us everything that a user municipality are putting out is for a very good reason. And notifying the motoring public, we would look at as an emergency broadcast.
Right. Councilor Rothschild?
From this map, do you anticipate a increased traffic on Clark Street then, of trucks? Since we're going to be detouring. So I know Clark Street residents, we already have a high concern there of traffic and speeding. So I'm just wondering what you're going to do proactively to make sure that trucks are not speeding down Clark. Is there going to be more speed numbers, more pulling people over?
I've got a great answer for you on this one. I'm actually very happy about this. So Sergeant Brian Ross, I think he addressed the council on the Jake brake ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe the
subcommittee.
So Brian Ross, one of my sergeants, just completed a very intensive 3-week Mass DOT truck certification. So he's very good at it, and he is planning on really focusing his attentions on this truck route to include Clark Street. So he's like, the state police have a truck team where you see them on 91 and they're got their scales out and they're weighing trucks and they're asking for. He's now certified to do all of that, and the fines that they can implement. He just did it on Union Street 2 nights ago. He wound up writing. Over $1,000 worth of fines and towed a tractor trailer that shouldn't have been on the road. So he's going to be an integral part from the police department in mitigating the truck issues as we look at this truck route, and particularly, of course, with all the concerns and the height awareness on Clark Street.
Okay, so I just want to be able to put the residents at ease around Clark Street so we can communicate about. Sergeant
Brian Ross.
Brian Ross.
So there'll be significant. There will be
more
signifigant
signage and more
yes.
slowdown.
Oh yeah.
And more,
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There'll be a ton of signage out there, and again, there'll be a heavy presence of Brian Ross, particularly, but of course, my police department,
okay.
especially in the infancy of these detours.
Okay. So it could have a unintended positive consequence of slowing down all traffic on Clark if you're paying more attention to Clark at that time.
Well, I suspect that it's going to slow down traffic in the entire city, but particularly Clark Street too.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Gomez?
Thank you, President. I'm pretty sure the chief mentioned that probably we're going to have police detours in some areas, or at least one area. And if yes, who's going to pay for that? And I have a concern between Liberty and Union Street.
Yep.
In those peak hours, I think traffic there is going to be super, super bad. And if in the peak hours, is any, we're going to do something in Liberty just to turn right instead of left? Just to mitigate the traffic, or is going to be a police there during the peak hours?
So it's a great observation, Councilor, and this is one of the things that we discussed at several of these meetings amongst ourselves. So I guess it's a two-part question. I'll address Liberty Street first. The only alternative to get around Lower Mill Pond would have been Adams Street to Cottage, and we looked at this and looked at this and looked at this, and the Adams to Cottage Street would be more of a nightmare. And I'll defer to that would be much more of a nightmare, particularly with the school, Maple Street there, the crossing of the kids, and so to Liberty Street to Union Street, we plan on putting an officer there. Again, we're going to have officers all over this in its infancy. So we'll put the downtown car will probably set up shop there just to make sure that everything's running smoothly, but they're going to be able to go right or left coming out of there, because it really would be a detriment to the detours if you're at Liberty and you can only go one way, because now you're or the other way, because now you got to go all the way back around either way.
Because the peak hours turning left there, I think it's going to be crazy.
I don't disagree with you, but again, picking your poison, Adams Street would be worse. So we're just going to have to monitor it and then make adjustments as we go. As far as the police details go, the city's not paying for the police details, particularly at Ferry Street and Lovefield. That'll be like it is now. The police details have been working down there, and they're being paid by the contractors.
Thank you.
So, 2 questions. It's not really a question.
Do we direct them to?
So the yellow and blue on here are suggested detour routes. If an individual wanted to go down Adams instead of going down Liberty, they're very free to do that.
Public way.
They
yeah.
could weave their way through all these streets if they found that to be better.
Yeah, these are suggested routes.
Right. Because I suspect, and Jeff, you and I talked about it, people will find ways that are maybe not these ways that work for them. The other thing that it may or may not be too late, but I really wish on things like this we had some sort of a mechanism where we could have, and it's probably extremely expensive, but a help desk phone that someone could call and say, there's a problem here, or I've got concerns, or this isn't working on our street, because I fear that there's going to be an influx of complaints all down this table, all into City Hall, and no way to amass them into a single place and tick them off. You may start working on one complaint that Owen has brought to you, but it's 5 other people have complained it to 5 different people, and it just feels like we may then start to step on each other in terms of trying to get back with people. It would, and maybe it's not anything we can do here, but it would be nice to have something where we could have a clearing desk or something to field all.
Well, I could tell you the phone number of the help desk.
Is your
It usually
cell phone?
lies at our police department.
I know,
And
well, that's the other thing.
non-emergency line. That's typically when these things happen. In
Are you going to be upstaffing that?
Yeah, okay.
Just saying.
Is that a thing?
retired.
Is that a thing?
I got free time.
Be careful what you wish for.
The visual of President Conniff on a helpline is rich. It's rich. It's rich. So what we've done with other projects and certainly can do with this one as far as consolidating the questions or whatnot, a 311 system is very expensive. I don't think that it is a proper use of taxpayers' money given the size of our city. What we have done in the past is create Google Forms where people can use it, or people who are picking up the phone can, and it goes into one spreadsheet in Excel. I shouldn't say Google Form that goes into an Excel. And then, assign people to, take care of it, whether it's DPW. We do something very similar with streetlights. When folks call, they'll call the mayor's office, they'll call, yes. And some of those items take a long time to fix.
Okay.
Yeah, but that, we've been thinking about that. I think that a very logical place for that starts with the Ferry Street webpage, and folks will put a mechanism there. I would say the help desk right now in City Hall after dispatch would be the mayor's office, and Lindsay
won't be around.
We have a plan, but she's really good about keeping track of what it is.
And I hear you. I just fear that there will be a lot of questions coming to Jeff constantly. What about? And I'm just trying to make sure that everybody can still get their job done while we are triaging 19 of the same question and not go to Jeff 19 times. If answering that on a Google Doc and then putting it somewhere that we can all refer to see if the answer is there first.
I think that's, I would also say, getting work done, and I know you and I have talked about this, using website and also having things that can print out and folks can speak to has been very helpful. It is a part of our jobs as public servants, and folks really like those personal responses to issues. I'd also say that as far as complaints or concerns from the public, the staff at City Hall and Public Safety and all our departments are used to an onslaught. If like taxes went up or we're good to go.
If you're good, then we're good.
Yeah, but it is coming, and I understand that it will also come to this board and concerns, and I would expect the school committee as well as buses are rerouted and questions about PVTA and the bus stop moving for a little while.
Right.
So I mean, we're anticipating that. And the bottom line, I would just also say, the website and social media is fine to get a message out. I just had a conversation with a constituent today, and they just don't trust Facebook. And even though our pages are now all verified as government official agencies, it's hard to figure that out because there are so many pages that have Easthampton in them. So the phone calls tend to come, when people want to know where the buck stops and what's going on. And, we are working on alternative communication things, but, there is a real gap between what goes on online and folks literally just calling to make sure what they read online or even in the paper is true and correct.
Yep.
And I wouldn't want to lose that human touch.
Understood. Yep.
Can I add something? So Chief Alberti and I were just chatting quick. There should be a way to funnel people to this web page and have a form that could be filled out with a note that, you know, expect a response of some sort within 24 hours or something reasonable. You said that you do that through your department.
So on our police website, not the Facebook page, although we have that there too, but on the actual website for the police department, we have links for anonymous tips, we have links for complaints, we have links for great job by the police department. And once you click on those links, it opens up another screen, and you type in your complaint or suggestion, and those are directed specifically to specific people's emails. So if, to your point on complaints, so if there was an email, somebody logged in and here's a complaint, I'm going to write a complaint because there's trucks going down my street and there's too many of them. Send. That would then go to whoever you designate in the city as one clearinghouse for all of these types of complaints. So what would happen is the IT director would create an email, a specific email to like ferrystreet@easthamptonma.gov, right? And those complaints would all go there for one particular person to sift through. That way there,
That would be good.
to your point, it's not 10 people getting the same complaints.
Exactly.
They could all
That
funnel
would be
and warehouse in one place.
That alone would be helpful.
Excellent.
Yep.
And I think the beauty of we wanted to come early, so we intend to put out a press release tomorrow because it's important to get the word out. If your next meeting is March 18th, you know, we can give you an update, I think, as the viability of that, and then I think we would be closer to the actual launch of the actual detour. So we have a little bit of time at our disposal to refine that element. But I think from the observation of these discussions and sometimes observing Facebook, you know, that's where you all can help us by reminding people or sending them to this place. There are always going to be questions that people don't want to formally do anything, but as long as we're all on the same page that there is this place, you know, that was a concerted effort that we wanted to embark on, so that you can direct people. And my commitment, you know, would be to try to keep this up to date, so that people can actually find the relevant information there, so that if people really want to know what's going on, there will be this place. So that was an important kind of part of our discussion.
You know, and also just to the, while this particular plan really contains the inconvenience to the general public for a certain amount of time, and we're hoping speeds up the project. There's also conversations going on and plans for some of the events in that area that are, you know, really a part of Easthampton's culture, and Mill Pond Live. The concerts are certainly a big part of that, as well as Park and Rec, and Laudable Productions are here tonight, and, you know, really proactively came to us and say, okay, what happens to our programming, and we feel like we've got a good plan. It's fluid, so we can adjust as we did, and that programming won't be disrupted. I mean, so I don't want to leave the council or the public with this idea that, you know, just a wonderful part of our city goes dormant for this 6 months. You know, it's already a little backed up, but, you know, it was kind of rip the Band-Aid off and get it done, rather than roll the dice, and sometimes it's open and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's one way. You know, but working very hard for things that happen in the Mill District and that area not to be overly disturbed, and give people options, whether that's parking or dates of events and stuff like that. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Jeff, back to you.
Final. I think adding the arrows two-way on the blue truck route makes sense. So that's entirely doable, and I think it has to be paired with. It's paired with some way to signify that
We got you.
that the intersection is going to be subject to delays, and that was the discussions that we had. Is that there has to be a way through there, but, you know, we want to be clear as we go forward that avoiding it is going to be the best scenario for people who have choices. So we're aware that there's visitors who are going to end up there, and they will ultimately get through. But for people who have the choice, you know, they're going to experience it, and then they're going to want to avoid it if possible. So I think that's kind of an important message. And then just to double back on the code red, if that seems viable, and I think that is the best way, because my concern when you mentioned that the notification in the mail, Councilor Gomez, was just where do we draw the line? And the code red system is going to be a much more inclusive way to get people aware. And so if that seems to be a potential preferred route to take.
And we'll re-advertise what the code red system is for those that don't have it prior to this. So guys can.
And I'm okay with that.
Sign up.
Sorry.
Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, President Connick. I'm okay with that. The concern is how soon we're gonna let people know, because as soon they know is better, and it doesn't matter the way that we're gonna tell them what's gonna happen. But I think as soon that we do it, I think it's gonna be a good idea.
I think the answer to that is as soon as we finalize what this is going to look like, which I'm guessing probably tomorrow, we'll punch the code red out tomorrow. And in that, we'll also put on our social media and websites what code red is for those folks that haven't signed up that would want to.
And I'll just hedge a little bit, I guess, just thinking maybe Monday. You know, like we talk about the press release going out on Monday, so we have a little bit of time to make sure that we can actually do some of the things. But I think in short order, as soon as the mass of information goes out, you know, we would want to have the code red update going out too.
Councilor Zarrett?
I think Councilor Rothschild had her hand up first.
I recognize you.
Thank you.
Age before.
Indeed. Oh boy, I just lost my. Those LED screens you see around construction zones. Sometimes, have you considered those? Are those expensive? That say things like on the following.
Oh, sorry, I thought they said they were doing that.
You're using those that say on the following days?
That's a variable message board.
Okay.
Variable
You're
message
using that,
board,
okay.
So,
Okay. All right, thanks.
I would recommend adding, if I don't know if it's appropriate, but something to the press release about Clark Street, because I just feel like the Clark Street residents will want to be acknowledged. Like, I just think they're gonna. No, it's not okay.
Did you have something you'd like to say?
But then, yeah.
No, maybe not. I just know there's a lot of. I mean, even just last night, public safety. I'm a Clark Street resident, but people come from Clark Street and just remind us we're still here. People are still speeding. There's still rollovers.
Yeah, so my counter to that would be this is going to drive some traffic to Florence Road, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we have the same issues on Florence Road and Union Street and East Street, and I mean, pick a street.
Yeah.
We could list them
But
all.
not even maybe list them, but there's going to be special attention to mitigate. I don't know the speed on those the roads affected or something.
I think
like that.
all the roads here are going to be affected, and Clark Street's listed with the rest of them.
Okay.
That would be my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Councilor Krasinski?
do we know when the variable message boards will be going up? It couldn't be too soon in my regard, because I think we not only notify, it seems like not everybody pays attention to Easthampton media, social media, et cetera. Folks who pass through the community need to be informed, and that variable message board will not only inform our citizens, but everyone who passes through.
Yeah, 2 weeks before. I mean, what happens with the variable message board, I've got two concerns there. People start to ignore them. You know, it's why on Route 90 they have those cute Boston slang like, I don't know, pack your car or whatever to get people's attention, literally. And then the other is the project's fluid. I mean, if we have 4 days of rain and you say it's going to happen in, April 1st, it might not happen April 1st, and we've got messaging way out in advance. I mean, the 2 weeks out is kind of like, get ready. But there is, and I was right with you. I was thinking, let's start, the day after council, let's get the message out, and our consultants were very clear, like, so by the time you close the door, you're going to get calls saying, you didn't tell me, because they're just driving by them, which I learned that. I don't know if, and also Paul, we haven't heard from Paul Frugel, who is our consultant on the One Ferry Street, and he did a lot of work on this map and is extremely informed about what can go right and wrong with these kind of plans. Paul.
It's going to go right. Paul Frugel, I'm with McMahon Associates. I did work on the plan here that you have in front of you. Just some clarifications on the arrows. With the way that those arrows were set up, it's kind of complicated with depending depiction that you see there, it's been simplified from what we have, which has a lot of different signage at various points. The goal is to convey to the general public that there's two routes that are going to be out there. One is for trucks and one is for passenger vehicles. The goal is we didn't want to have trucks going down some of the narrow streets, and we didn't want them going down, like down Clapp Street, for example, because the geometry at certain intersections are quite confined, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we propose is a comfortable route and it's not going to really upset any neighbors or users of those particular roads. With respect to the signs and or the arrows, it's basically, if you can just picture, if I'm on Pleasant Street and I want to go to Ferry and I didn't see any advance warning prior to that, and I get to the Ferry Street intersection, which is going to be well signed, it's going to basically prohibit right-hand turns for me to get to Ferry. So how do we get there? So we have a resultant one-way detour that, if I'm a truck, follow the blue line, it's going to take me to O'Neill and then down to Northampton Street, and then basically do a loop back through Union Street, Cottage, and then down Clark, and ultimately back to East End Ferry. So that's generally the concept with a truck detour, and that's something that would be signed at various junction points along the route. If I'm a vehicle in that same context, we would guide them towards Clapp Street, which is suitable for passenger vehicles and larger, heavier vehicles. And then all the way down to Fort Hill, and then back to East, and then ultimately down to Ferry Street. So that's the directional detour that's identified. Because technically we wouldn't be detouring somebody on O'Neill Street in the southbound direction or the eastbound direction. It would be opposite.
I'm just curious, going back to Councilor Westchild's Clark Street, why didn't we just send the trucks all the way down East Street, hitting the main road and then turning right there? I mean, is there a reason why we have to send them down Clark? I mean, they're used to going on that street. People are used to trucks there.
You're talking about the Holyoke and East Street intersection?
Yeah, but if you're going to turn right there, is that because it's too dangerous, Bob? I don't know. I just was curious why we didn't do that instead of sending them down a neighborhood. You're worried about that turn? The turn?
So you're talking about, just so I understand you, Counselor, rather than using
Clark Street for trucks.
Right. Where do you want to send them?
East to
Holyoke Street and turn right on Holyoke Street into town. You don't like that?
No. Well, I wouldn't, because the traffic coming down a mountain, by the time you get that intersection, you got a TT unit trying to get over that, trying to make that tight turn. There's no one of the
that makes sense.
And we did talk about this, but it was a matter of trying to get the trucks, A, not to get smashed into from the traffic coming down a mountain, but B, trying to get them to make that hard right.
And you're
without going into the other lane of traffic, and we all know Holyoke Streets.
And there's no turns off of Clark Street into Cottage. It's like a straight Y right there. I understand. Okay.
But we did look at that. I mean,
that's a good point.
That we looked at that. We looked at several other options, and this is constructively what we came up with.
Councilor Lynch?
Is this copy going to be added to the press release? Yeah. Because the one I have has all the signs and crazy.
Yeah, we're not going to publish the sign version.
Okay, is this going to be on the website or something?
Possibly.
All right.
We get this.
I got a signed copy. I got a signed copy. It's autographed.
Special.
Wookie bets.
So this is the one that's going out, because this is a lot easier to understand.
Councilor Kwasinski?
I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this to our attention, for thinking it through ahead. It is very different than when the bridge closed, going from Route 10 over the Manningham River. And it's thought through. We appreciate that, and appreciate our having the opportunity to have input. I think I speak for the whole council in that regard.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just feel obligated to point the council and the public also to the Easthampton Public School page, because very similar to this map, there's another map and traffic plan for the roundabout on Park Street. So, and how that traffic goes, and that was unveiled. Also, there will be similar mapping on Route 10 when that goes under construction. And I am excited about the development, but very aware that all three of these projects overlap at the same time. So when it rains, it pours. It does. But similar planning where we're letting everybody know on what the and the school project stuff is being pushed now to the front page of the landing page of our website, and every physical project update, what's happened over the week with pictures is put on there, and Lieutenant Kelly was very good to come on TV with me and walk through why the traffic is happening the way it is, and the school building committee has started to put more and more information around that traffic pattern. So
thank you.
Great, that's
yeah.
great.
I just
Still have more to do?
Not on this topic.
Oh, but wait, I'm pretty sure you told me 10 minutes, and we're about 45 in right now.
So we paused that.
Yeah, that was our fault.
That was our fault.
Usually I blame him, but I can't.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Next, whatever the next thing.
Oh, well, I
Did
think
you want to do Conway?
several people can depart, so if you just give me one moment, we'll switch gears.
Oh, sure.
It's quite a gear shift.
Okay. Since you're not leaving, I can have a comment about one more comment with the arrows. When you explained the arrows, now I think if you just did a two-way in Northampton and leave those 2 ones, that would.
Well, so with this arrow,
Yeah, I get that arrow.
so if you're coming down this way and you can't take a left, you go down
Right.
this way.
No, I totally understand these two. I meant if you just put one two-way this way, it would all make sense to me.
Well, we're not detouring trucks this way.
No, we're not. Do we want to do a report?
All
I'm
right.
sorry. Do we want to do
got it.
a report while we're waiting for Jeff? Or Jeff, are you ready?
ready.
Okay.
He wants to go home too.
No.
We should just leave the arrows off and for their own knowledge. They can know which way they're going to be.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm not very good at puns. I was trying to come up with some kind of great pun, but we are shifting gears to a different topic. So,
Taking a detour.
taking a detour, a planned route, not by car. It's really is with some great pleasure that I wanted to take an opportunity to provide an update and kind of debut this project that we embarked on with the Conway School last year. It's actually been exactly a year since we completed this project. And I wanted to provide the brief overview and a summary so that U.S. City Councilors have some awareness of this project and how it will ideally form the foundation for a couple other projects that we would like to envision in the future. But before I do that, what I was hoping to do is have Scott Kavanaugh, who's a resident CPA member and a member of the Rail Trail Committee, to come and give a little bit of the background that led to this project, because it was through Scott's kind of enthusiasm that it got me really excited to really kind of pursue this with some level of aggression. So Scott, do you mind coming up? Scott's been very patient. I told him we'd be out at like 7:15.
That's what he tells all his guests.
Good evening. Jeff asked me to give just a brief 45-minute background on this. So I'll try to keep brief. Basically, you all know that here in Easthampton, we're lucky enough to have this gem of a bike path come through our community thanks to the hard work of many people, and I'm looking at Barb over there. And for a number of years, some folks have been thinking about how can we expand upon this? How can we make this even better? And one idea that people have kept coming back to is the idea of connecting the bike path to our city schools. Just to give you kind of a, before we get to Eastham, just to give you a nationwide snapshot, this is an issue that people have been thinking about a lot over the past 20 years or so. In 1969, 50% of U.S. school children either walked or biked to school. And by 2001, that number was down to 15%. So in 30 years, it was a dramatic drop, really in one generation. And coupled with that, we've seen a dramatic increase in childhood obesity. We have 25 million obese kids in America. Also, studies have shown that kids who ride their bikes or walk to school have greater levels of concentration while they're in school. And so with that significant decrease in who's biking and walking to school, fewer and fewer kids are getting that benefit. Also on a community level, it's estimated that 20 to 30% of morning traffic is due to parents dropping their kids off at school. So the more kids we can get getting to school either by walking or biking, it takes cars off the road and decreases traffic. So those are all kind of stats that communities around the nation are looking at, and there's a number of communities around the country, really in the past 20 years that have tried to reverse this trend. So in Easthampton, just to give you kind of a background of what's happened in Easthampton, in April of 2017, the Manhan Committee met and talked about rail trail expansion possibilities and determined the three highest priority expansion priorities and sent a letter to then Mayor Cadger. The top of the three highest priority, the top one was to expand the rail trail to the proposed new school site. In the next year, in 2018, we looked at that further. Realized that one of the main sources of funding for these projects in the Commonwealth is through the Safe Routes to Schools program, which is through the Mass DOT. In order to have that funding available to us, we needed to be an active member of Safe Routes to School. So we sort of reactivated our membership in Safe Routes to School by doing a couple things. One was having a bike and walk to school day, which we did in 2018 and repeated in 2019. I was part of that day both times. It was very, very successful. Had a lot of kids participate. A lot of kids really excited about this. The second thing we did is we had a survey that went out to parents of students in the school system. Unfortunately, it was right at the end of the school year in 2018, so the response rate of that survey was really low. But what we did find with that survey, the results, what it did suggest is that, especially in the elementary schools, Easthampton has a higher than average rate of walking and biking to school. And in Maple School in particular, Maple School had over 50% of respondents say that their kids either walk or bike to school. So we've got a lot of amazing foundation for this in Easthampton, and now we have the challenge of we are moving our school children. We're moving our school children to a site that is further from a lot of residences. And so, while many people are thrilled about the new school, and I am too, I do see this as a challenge that we really want to address. How do we keep our high percentages of kids walking and biking to school while moving the school to a place that's further from where a lot of them live? And really one of the biggest ways that this could be possible is by extending the Manhan Rail Trail to the new school site. Parents, in survey after survey, why do kids not bike and walk to school? It's because parents don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe when there's not a safe way to get there, when they have to cross busy streets. And so this would be a way to provide a safe access to the new school for Easthampton school children. And so building off that, so this is something that had been percolating for a long time. As part of this, I approached Jeff, and then in September of 2018, city planner Jeff Bagg, and Mayor LaChapelle and I went for a nice bike tour where we rode around and looked at the potential ways that this could happen. And I think it was really at that time that sort of this mantle got kind of handed off to Jeff. He ran with this a little bit, and he could talk about how from all that it kind of evolved into this presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
So I really appreciate Scott's enthusiasm about it, and the overview is what leads to this point in time. And I think where Scott kind of described it as a challenge, I think it's actually an opportunity, and I think that that's what this is all about, is looking ahead. For a nominal fee, the Conway School does projects like this, and what I feel like we got is a wealth of information. Knowing the time and how long we've already been here, I'm going to give you a cursory overview, and I'm going to skip, this is not the whole report, but I'm going to skip, there were 3 community meetings. They were well attended, as a lot of our meetings have been, good participation levels, and so that is documented in the report, and there's a lot of context and background information about where our population centers are and where our people live and kind of their current modes of transportation. But jumping right in, someone along the way gave me this article from 1994, and I think it's out. I'm sure I could be corrected. Oh, it says this is the Coleman Road. This is for people who were envisioning the rail trail before it existed, and for me, it's really a piece of inspiration that this is not too wild and crazy. It's a level of commitment that people have to understand that needs to be there, but it's not. This is how things start, and then this picture is the celebration for when the bridge was put over Route 10, and unfortunately I wasn't there, but to me it's a party and a celebration for years of worth of work, and so that's where this is kind of motivating me. This map, I realize you cannot see, but what it shows is a concentration on the school property, and I think what Scott said is that the Whitebrook property had been identified preliminarily for a long time. It's listed in the 2008 master plan as a potential site, and in the master plan, and I'll get to at the end, it's identified as a goal. So, as part of my job, I'm trying to not create new far off projects. I'm trying to still go through the master plan and projects that have already been identified, and where there's funding is the key. And now we have this opportunity with the new school under construction that people are going to start thinking about this. And so the Conway School was asked to look at how can people get to the property. And there are multiple paths, but I'm just going to choose a couple from the report to highlight. And so this is an image. On the lower part of the image, you can see Whitebrook. There is a patch of woods, but not very far through that patch of wood are Williston's athletic fields. You can see the track, and then to the right, just in the top of the page, the middle of the page, sorry, is Nonotuck. And then you can see going kind of to the top of the page is the high school. And then as you go down where item B and A are streets that ultimately connect to the rail trail. And so what we looked at was the feasibility of certain routes. And this is a route that was identified way long ago and is listed in our Complete Streets Prioritization Plan as an item to consider. These are some images that are difficult to see, but A is if you're familiar with the area, you leave the rail trail and you cross through private property, happens to be a manufacturing company, and you go up one of our city streets, and then you have this option. You can choose Daly Field, or you can go to Williston. You can enter into Nonotuck Park, and so it's a very viable sort of route that many people are currently taking. And then the image on the D is actually South Street. So the junction of the rail trail at South Street, and you go up South Street, and not too far from there you are at the new school site. These are just additional images of E is Williston Fields. That there's potential opportunity to partner with Williston, and they've done some work in those woods to go over a brook. So if you have not been out there is a bridge suitable for bike and pedestrian traffic to cross. Then sort of looking at Whitebrook, which is at the top, and going generally south, you can see Treehouse Communities listed there as item F. And then what became really apparent in looking at this is that from Plain Street, there are a series of protected open space parcels that the city owns that could create that already create this kind of network, this available land to potentially cross over. And so taking the big picture, the Plains is one of our high concentrations of people, the population, but it doesn't have, unfortunately, it doesn't have any kind of access to the bike path. So this is a lofty goal, but this is something that seems worth pursuing and noteworthy. And it would be, there in the report there are some case studies of other communities who have done the more rustic and rural kind of path or multi-use path through similar properties. This is the route that looks at South Street. And then I did want to at least acknowledge that through this there was this clear observation that we have a large utility easement corridor through the city. It's wrought with a lot of difficult conversations with utility companies who typically don't want public accessing their properties, but it is listed, and it's important because it basically traverses part of our entire city. And the report really does a good job of looking a little bit more broadly. So this is Holyoke Street, going up 141 towards the mountain, and there's an observation that there's a large population of our community that lives off of Holyoke Street that has to go around water. And water was identified as a really nice feature. We love our ponds, but they create a barrier for people to get to places, in particular, like if we're looking at the school. So this is a little bit of a vision that could potentially cross National Pond. And it's not something that's unique. So this image is one of the pedestrian bridges that used to cross Lower Mill Pond. So our mills were once manufacturing hubs, and the people who worked in the mills lived in New City, and they used to cross a pedestrian bridge over Lower Mill Pond. And this is the image that kind of illustrates that right now people have to traverse the entire length of Everett Street and back and forth. And the one note I do have is that there are some dash lines depicting potential routes across Lower Mill Pond. And if I had caught this sooner, I would have taken that dashed orange and I would have dragged it more towards the middle. But I think the report finds that someday putting some kind of pedestrian access over Lower Mill Pond would open up a lot of opportunity. And so this is where we go kind of big picture, which is if you look at New City and they could access the bike path in a more direct manner, then once on the bike path, if we're making another connection from the rail trail to the school, then we've created this loop and this way for people to get to the new school property via the bike path. So I think this is near the end, but there are other things that quickly become apparent and that are supported by our other studies. So picture A is Route 10. You've left West Street. You've gone over the Manhan River, and you're going up towards, let's say, CVS. So this proposes, a side path, this widening of the sidewalk to create a multi-use path along Route 10 to get people out Route 10. And this is not a new concept, but these students at the Conway School heard public feedback. They looked at it and they're like, yeah, this makes sense. This needs to be on your list. This is an important, area to look at in the future. So I am almost done, but this is the master plan. These are prioritized strategies. Which is kind of rare, actually. A lot of times master plans just give you the blanket list, then they're not prioritized. But item number 2 was to extend the rail trail to Northampton, which we've done, to Southampton, which has been done, and we need Nonotuck Park and the schools to be under consideration, at least at some point in the future. The recreation section really emphasizes, so this is 2008, make connectivity a priority, give residents and visitors a safe way to walk or bike between trails, parks, and downtown. And then the specifics are connect Nonotuck Park to the rail trail, connect the trail to schools, and then create more pedestrian and bike-friendly routes. throughout the city. Again, strategy 5 is the transportation section, establish a safe routes to school program, and then this is the master plan map. It's a little busy, but if you look at the two circles, the two blue circles at the bottom, just above that, this future new school site, connect to trails. And then there's arrows kind of showing you that you're close to Nantucket, you're close to neighborhoods, and there's this desire. So my point being that to continue this discussion is not a very new idea, but there's a new set of there's new momentum, and there's opportunity to explore. So the open space plan obviously touches on that, and then I did stop here because the text is so small in the complete streets plan, but many of these projects were also identified in the prioritization project in 2017, and these types of projects are extremely beneficial when we do ultimately apply for grant funding, to show that this is not a random idea out of the blue. This has been sort of talked about, supported, and so part of my reason is to make sure that City Council knows that we have this Conway School report, make sure that some of our residents who are interested in this can find it on the Planning Department's website. And then I think we're going to continue, a conversation with the Conway School. They've come back to me and asked about looking more closely at the Plain Street to Whitebrook property, because there's a lot of uncharted territory. No one's ever really looked at the feasibility, but it's an opportunity that I don't want to pass up, while also pursuing that other connection. So. Scott got me all jazzed. We took a bike ride. It was really fun, and I think it's an important project. I didn't plan to say this. We are doing many things. So I think it's easy for people to pinpoint specific issues that are currently happening, and those are really important, but we should not stop continuing to take a bigger picture look at a variety of different things. So this is not to take away from looking at infrastructure, because we're also doing that, but this is also just continuing this other dialogue and discussion that is really important, that we don't stop, at least talking about it. So.
100% agree. And just actually off of Jeff's comment, I would just say that the importance of doing these studies connect to the stacking of grants we've been so successful to. One of my big concerns around this plan when it came out, and I want to be very clear to the council and to the public, New City does not have access to some of the most rich leisure opportunities and also connection. They also are a part of the city. When you look at income and poverty, it's pretty high. Along these plans, including the bridge across Lower Mill Pond, this is part and parcel with really taking a hard look at housing and how you keep housing in that area affordable, and it's important for across all age groups. But I would just want to send kind of a shot across the bow that these projects, these plans, for myself and for my administration, clearly connect with affordable housing, and some pretty hard asks coming up of this council around how we do that, to, I'm sure, really hard conversations in our community that will not necessarily maximize property to its biggest economic potential. It takes a while to pull them all together, but there is a common theme, and we want to back that up. But so I just wanted to quickly say that.
Jeff, this was great. Thank you very much. This was unbelievable. What's the next concrete step that you're going to take to have the Conway School do a little bit more broadening of some of their planning? Is that the next thing we can look for? Or?
Yeah, that's what I anticipate being something that potentially would happen in the spring. The route from Plain Street requires a lot more investigation, but I am not shy about pursuing multiple elements at the same time. So I think the other route that shows promise is more potentially more immediate, which is this vision from the rail trail. if only getting to the high school.
Yeah.
You know, I think this map, this picture really shows that while Whitebrook by car is a little bit more distant, we actually have a different type of hub taking shape. It's already there, but the proximity of Whitebrook to Nonotuck and the proximity of Whitebrook, Nonotuck, and the high school are really important to be aware of. This is not a great distance. B shows Hisgan Ave as just, it may not be the only route, but it is one of the most direct. So my purpose of mentioning complete streets is that there's potentially multiple funding sources available. I think to the mayor's point, when and if it all takes shape is still unknown. So, you know, we have other, you know, potential projects that are suitable for complete streets, but for safe routes to school, beginning to build the argument as Scott kind of laid out, we talked about potentially doing another survey and gathering more data, but to be preparing for some kind of potential use of safe routes to school funding, which we have this compelling case, whether it's before the school's done or soon thereafter, that we've been looking at this for quite some time, and I think, you know, there's always this timeline and this continuum of when funding seems like it's the most viable. So, did I answer that? I know it's not abundantly clear. I mean, it is somewhat dependent upon funding and where we can access funding and the things that they're looking for. But that's been one of my primary purposes, is to update our plans so we have a long list of viable projects to pick from.
Right. Councilor Rossio?
I just wanted to thank Scott Kavanaugh for coming, and it just really shows how when you're passionate about something and you put the time and effort, you can really make change in the city, and I find it's really inspiring. So thank you for coming out. And also when I moved here in 2009, I remember that my landlord in the house we were renting said, "Oh, and they're supposed to be extending the trail to Northampton," and it sounded like one of those things that might happen. And then I was at that celebration on the bridge, and so it is fun to see the change happen and the people's intentions become reality. So just thank you.
Councilor Peak?
Yeah, thanks for all this. This is great. One thing that Scott said that really kind of struck me and sobered me was that when it comes to Maple School, which is my precinct, such a high percentage of students are walking and biking right now, and all of them are going to they're about to lose that opportunity effectively, you know, when with locating the school on the other side of the pond. So if there's anything that we can do to start talking about some way of creating some sort of passage over Nashua Pond, I would be really interested in, you know, so like the thing that you just showed, like I'd be very interested in seeing whatever I could do to help make that happen. That's getting them the opportunity to do that is a huge priority, I think.
Great.
What Councilor Peak just said, I won't repeat it, and but I agree. Regarding the, I've looked a lot at the Hisgan Avenue spoke, for lack of a better term, and it seems like of that entire route, the linchpin, not you, not Councilor Lynch, but is actually the Hisgan Avenue access route. Is there enough room on that street to create a separate bike path, or would you have to take a lane? Would you have to make that street one way?
We haven't gotten that level of detail.
Okay.
It's a perfect next step to continue to explore feasibility. I can't answer that.
Okay.
Councilor Lynch?
So I grew up on Plain Street, and then I moved to Apple Tree Lane, which is right where that entrance is on Plain Street, and I know it all too well. That's how I used to get to Whitebrook when I went to school there. I used to ride my bike through the trails and everything in the back there. I do know that it's great and it's perfect access. My only question would be, like, what would the future plan after that, if that was the route we went, to look at, say, people on Campbell Drive, right? What choices do they have to getting to that access? You know, is it Strong? Is it Line? What's the best way? Hendrick Street, you know, to try to get some of those people, because there's not a direct route. They'd have to go one of those roads, and they're pretty busy. I mean, it's still better than what they have for options now, and I think it's great, but I think we should just keep that in the back of our mind. And then also, Brook Street, at the end of Brook Street, has that access to like the soccer fields. You know, I don't know if that's been looked at as an option, and I don't know who owns those properties, but that goes directly to the backside of Whitebrook and the back soccer fields. So I don't know if that's been looked at, and that might be private lands too. But.
There's definitely been consideration of that, and I think you seem to have captured that the city doesn't own it, so that is like one of the perceived hurdles. Whereas shifting it over, the city owns a series of open space parcels. The way the report is structured is it clearly identifies that there may be other options or routes, but the idea is the driving force of this. And any opportunity I have to drill down deeper on any of the sections, I will take them to kind of further each component along. Great.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. No, I don't think so. Sorry. You can ask him if you want, but we're, sorry. Moving on to appointments. Councilor Lynch.
Yes, appointments. We have one for consideration, Patricia Wojcik, to the Council on Aging. I spoke to Ms. Wojcik, and she was very enthusiastic around helping other retirees and people at the Council on Aging. She currently is a member. She used to be an officer at the council. She volunteers with Robin as well and helps out in multiple areas of the city. Really just seemed overly passionate and wants to jump in and be more involved with the Council on Aging and working with Brandon. So that's pretty much what I have. Unless there's any questions right now, I'll make a motion. Perfect. I'd like to make a motion to approve the mayoral appointment for Patricia Wojcik on the Council on Aging, term expiration of 12/31/2022. Second.
Motion and a second to approve Pat Wojcik to the Council on Aging, term expiration 12/31/22. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Okay, and I have some new business that I'd like to move. 3 mayoral appointments to the committee. Louise Jacob for the Easthampton Cultural Council. I make a motion to move these. Louise Jacob, Easthampton Cultural Council, 12/31/22 expiration. David Fagnan to the Board of Public Works, 12/31/2020. And Robert Dixon for the Personal Director, 12/31/2022.
Second.
Motion is second for 3 mayoral appointments. Louise Jacob to the Easthampton Cultural Council, David Fagnan to the Board of Public Works, and Robert Dixon as the Personnel Director. Any further discussion? Councilor Zaret.
Question. On the application, it says, please attach a letter stating your reasons and other qualifications, et cetera, for seeking an appointment. I don't know, Mayor, if you know, were there any such letters attached to Louise Jacob or David Fagnan's applications?
Yeah, I thought I thought they both had supporting material with the application, but I can look into that. I also was remiss to change that form to actually eliminate that and just go by for appointments to just use the plain language of the charter. And I don't have the form together. I just didn't edit it yet.
If there's supporting material, would I be able to?
Yeah, I'll look if there are some.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay.
That concludes.
Do you have another meeting?
Oh, yeah, meeting on the 18th at 5:30 in the basement, room A.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
President Connor. We did meet on the 26th. where we made some decisions. Our next meeting is going to be on March 10th at 6 p.m., where we are going to dedicate the meeting to the new plastics ordinance. We're going to try to work through that relatively quickly. We do have some other things on our agenda. March 10th, 6 p.m. And we were able to get some closure on the ordinance change around the consumption of alcohol. We have not worked on the cannabis piece of that yet, but we are ready to move that. And so in the form of a motion, I'm going to set a public hearing for April 1st at 6:15 in these chambers for the alcohol portion of that.
Second.
Motion second to set a public hearing on the open consumption of alcohol only.
Alcohol only.
Alcohol only on 4/1/20. All in, any discussion? Councilor Vrist.
2 questions. Is this an amendment to an existing ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Does it require city attorney review? I only say that because
well,
we've had these discussions
the
in the
answer to that
past.
question could be easily yes, since it's an ordinance, and ordinance oftentimes are helped. I think in this case, as the chair, I feel comfortable with it not receiving review because of the nature of the changes.
We already had an open consumption of alcohol ordinance, so this is minor changes to that.
I would say some of the changes are, I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as minor, but they're in line with the current ordinance.
Okay,
But
so we're not dealing with the cannabis part of it.
We're not dealing with the cannabis part.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to send it to you as, it's because, yeah.
Immediately.
Immediately. I think Owen had something.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment, most of these changes are basically just correcting language. For instance, where some of the names of public spaces that are no longer go by those names were changed, and incorporating some pre-existing state language just into our local language, as we talked about with the crosswalks. You know, changing, I think, the structure of some fines.
Yeah, it's fine.
So it's it's not, it's nothing new generally. It's,
okay.
Like I said, I feel comfortable at this point as the chair.
Just wondering if we're going to, on what you were going to be sending to Barb, we'll have the current ordinance, the proposed changes to that ordinance outlined in red for that, and that way we can go over quickly as possible, and
I think that would be fun.
that would be helpful.
That'll be something.
And we won't be waiting for the packet to get that, I presume.
I can
Right.
send it as soon as I get it.
As soon as you get it.
Okay, great, thank you.
And we did discuss the engine brake proposal. One of the at this point we're kind of in a holding pattern with that. We've met with Officer Ross, I believe.
Yes.
Brian Ross.
Yeah, and he had basically was looking into some of the concerns that were brought up, and so we're going to revisit that after some of those things had been looked into. At this point, that concludes.
Okay, thank you. Property, Councilor Zara. I keep forgetting that.
I will keep this brief, and I'll try to really, what's brief for Owen Zara, it may not be brief for the rest of you. But, so we met last Thursday, the 27th, at 6 p.m. to have a discussion about the dog park, and in a very interesting 11th hour development. So as many of you know, there was a proposal on the table with a public hearing set for a parcel across the street from the solar landfill on Oliver, and there have been some feedback around that, both from abutters as well as community members, and some concerns about the viability of that parcel for the dog park. And I'll thank him in advance. Councilor Rist, through a discussion with Director Mason, discovered that there was a potential parcel kind of sandwiched between the back side of the cemetery and if you're heading towards the park to the left of Williston Avenue. So we agreed to make a request to the Parks Commission and President Coniff is currently reviewing that schematic as we speak. We agreed to make a request to the Parks Commission to allow us to consider this as a potential site for the park. Really quickly, one of the great things about this is it checks a lot of boxes that would not have been checked with the proposed Oliver Street site, namely access for most people in being in the center of town, walkable certainly, and the Parks Department seemed to be more, at least from Director Mason's standpoint, more apt to help service it, which is an important criteria for the Stanton grant. So the Parks Commission meets on the 18th, which is unfortunately coincides with City Council. Otherwise, I would probably want to be at that meeting. They will vote at that point whether we can use this parcel. And then I've already asked in a letter to email to Planner Bag if there's any money left over for the Berkshire Design Group then to create a schematic similar to what they did for the Oliver Street parcel. And we will then hopefully, if that's only affirmative, move forward with that site for the public hearing. So we also agree at this time to move the public hearing to April 15th instead of April 1st. So I guess I probably have to make that in the form of a motion. In the form of a motion, I'd like to request that the public hearing originally scheduled for April 1st regarding the dog park be moved to April 15th.
Second.
Motion is second to schedule a public hearing or change the public hearing from April 1st to April 15th for the discussion of a potential dog park. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Councilor Rist, did you want to comment at all about, and thank you, by the way, I really appreciate you coming through with that.
I'll send this little map of mine to everybody. It just came about in a separate discussion with John Mason. He brought it up, and he felt it would be very good. Just to inform you, it's land that was used for pond dredging. Material was put in this area. It was also used to stage the high school construction. It's fairly well cleared already. There would be a lot less tree cutting, a road access and parking area, and enough land to provide for the two size parks, small dog, large dog. To be honest with you, I was opposed to the Oliver Street for a lot of reasons, and I just asked John why, give me your reasons for not, because I missed what he had said, and he said, well, the sites were not even possible because of the topography, let alone the tree cutting
in Nonotuck Park.
In Nonotuck. And he said, well, I had this one, but nobody asked me. So I said, okay. So if John and the park people are in favor of it, I think it's a win-win for the people who can't drive. And I think that kind of access is critical. If we're going to do it, it's got to be used. And I think there's a lot of other councilors who felt the same way. Oliver Street wasn't going to be used. It'd become an albatross. And this will be used. It's quite close to the center of town. People already walk their dogs all the way up to Nonotuck, and they let them roam. Now, if they have this park, maybe they won't do that so much. Okay. So I'm thrilled that John and I ran with it, and it looks like it's going to happen. I've heard from Park and Rec people; the commission is very in favor of it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Councilor. I just wanted to speak to it briefly, if I may. We're only going to get one chance to get this right with the dog park. There's a Stanton grant that's giving us the money, primarily most of it, to do the park. We're not going to get a second park in Easthampton in any foreseeable future. I'm so thrilled to think that we're going to be able to place it centrally rather than on the outskirts. I drew a map at the meeting and presented it. That map showed that the site on Oliver Street, the first quarter mile and the first half mile, more people from Northampton were closer to the dog park than to Easthampton residents. It just didn't make sense. So I'm thrilled that Councilor Rist and John Mason put this proposal together. I think we're going to have a great dog park in the city, and it will benefit not only the dogs, the humans, but our downtown business, because I think people will be transferring their their energies to that general area, and it'll be good for the entire city. So, thank you.
Councilor Zeri, rest
Yeah.
of your report?
Yeah, thanks again, Councilor Rist. In regards to our other agenda item, evaluation of city-owned property, no, that's what we were just talking about. Request to inventory city-owned property, that's kind of on the back burner right now as we kind of move forward with this more pressing agenda item regarding the dog park. We have not yet set another meeting. I think that will, to some degree, rely on the outcome of the vote with Parks and Rec, but we'll talk amongst ourselves and figure out a meeting soon. And thus concludes.
Can I ask a question about the first item there?
Just unconcluded.
I know. Request to inventory city-owned property. So it's been on for 2 years. I've seen nothing. What is the point of this? Like, at the end of your inventory, you will be able to say and do what?
Well, I think the initial purpose in conversation with the planner was to help identify and outline kind of key uses. First of all, identify what we have available in terms of city parcels, because it doesn't seem to be well-known or organized. There's no well-known or organized list of available city parcels. There's a lot of reuse, sale, and need for city property at the moment. And again, we don't have a well-identified list of what's available or potential uses. So that would be the.
Is there a reason it's taking 2 years? I mean, let me ask you this. If we took it off without prejudice, could we bring it back when you guys are ready to re-up it?
This item was only addressed once previously in the last term in regards to meeting about it, so I don't have an answer for you as to why it's taken 2 years.
Well, would you then object to removing it without prejudice?
I would, because it hasn't been properly addressed. And so I'd like to actually start discussing it.
We'll give you 60 days to properly address it and move some action on it. There is something in our rules or the charter where things have to move, and this doesn't seem to have moved. So if it's going to move, great, all in. But if it's not going to move, we can bring it back, certainly.
Sure, with all due respect, I don't think it was properly tended to previously within the committee, and that's all I'll say about that.
And that's fine. That's fine.
But I'd like to keep it on so that we can actually start discussing it.
Okay, so we'll look for those updates then.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Peak.
Oh, that concludes.
Thank you, Madam President. We met last week. We actually did a lot of stuff. Or sorry, yeah, that was what, 2 weeks ago now. That was last week. Yeah, sorry, it's almost time. So yeah, I don't actually think I have any motions in hand on any of these items. Yeah. Unless.
I thought we did around creating the committee for the senior tax work-off.
Yeah, I agree that was a thing, but do we? Is it in the? Is it in the packet? That was my thing. I couldn't.
Well, I'm not sure.
I mean, go ahead, Councilor.
I think Councilor Coniff actually has the motion right here for us.
If you have the motion, then let's start.
And all
with
we're
that.
doing is creating the committee that will establish
I can
parameters behind it. So I think we could do that tonight.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Give it to me when you're done.
Okay, great. So, yes, this was an item from Councilor Krasinski to form a study committee of sorts around a senior tax work-off. What we basically were talking about is mostly the composition of that committee. We were thinking of something sort of like what we've done with the Charter Review Committee and with the ad hoc Ranked Choice Voting Implementation Committee, where it's a special committee of the council, but that there could be some non-council members on it. And after talking about some different compositions, what we settled on was a committee with 2 city councilors, 2 representatives from the Council on Aging, 2 residents, and a city, a representative from the city from the finance, or the finance staff. So that was what we had sort of agreed on in composition. Other than that, we left it pretty broad, so with that said, I'll just make the motion.
Sure.
Unless there's any questions.
I did have a question, if I may, and I apologize for not being at the meeting. I've had too many flu cases in my house. My wife had the flu twice, both A and B, and the kids did, so it was a real mess. I apologize. But the question I had was, does it make any sense to add someone from Human Resources to the committee?
You know, we were thinking about Human Resources, and we were thinking about a lot of other people, but what we sort of thought was that those people are, of course, welcome to drop in and consult at any time. We just wanted to, in terms of the people who would be voting and be expected to attend every meeting, we wanted to keep the size small. I think if the city wanted to send someone from Human Resources instead of Finance, that we could work something out there. But just in terms of the number of city employees that we're sending, and we wanted to keep it, a small crowd.
And I will add, there has been a considerable amount of research done on this by Joe Banas and myself and Brendan from the COA. We've met regularly on this. So there's a lot of information we'll be able to bring to the party and then kind of guide how things go from there, I guess.
Excellent.
Councilor Pete, if you'd like to.
I'll make the motion. Pursuant to City Council Rule 11A, I hereby request approval by the City Council for the creation of an ad hoc committee to be known as the Senior Tax Work-Off Program Committee. The committee shall consist of the following members: 2 city councilors, 2 Council on Aging representatives, 2 residents, 1 city finance representative. For the following purpose: to determine the parameters of a senior tax work-off program as allowed by law and prepare a report for the full council with their recommendations.
Second.
Motion is second to create a senior tax work-off program committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those abstain. So what will happen is, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, so we'll, by virtue of this meeting, de facto notice has gone out, but we will also, I'd ask all of you to reach out, and we'll make sure that people are aware that they should let me know if they'd like to be on the committee.
Great. Okay, so we have 2 rule changes we've been discussing. I would anticipate us moving on both of those at our next meeting. There's a couple things we wanted to chat with Barb about one thing, and in one area I just did not move quickly enough on getting something into the packet. So those will be hopefully next week.
Tomorrow night.
Next week, or sorry, next meeting we will be discussing those. Tomorrow night we will be meeting at 5 p.m. And while we're at it, I would like to make a motion to move to rules the Administrative Code 20-1 amendments to Easthampton City Arts.
Second.
Motion is second to move the administrative code change regarding Easthampton City Arts to the Rules Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you, Councilor Peak. I believe we have no old business, and we have taken care of all of the new business. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have 3 appropriations to sign, everybody.